Lovely. Welcome everybody to Through the Grapevine episode 7. Of course, you're joined by the usual 3 idiots. But we got a special idiot here today with us, and I know what you're all thinking. You're all super happy. You're glad that finally they're replacing me as a host, but no, that's not the case. Oren is not going to be replacing me as the host of Through the Grapevine. And instead, he's showing us as a special guest, and this is going to be one of the more interesting episodes, I hope, at least because
no pressure. All right.
Yeah, it's mainly I'm just at least we're going to get somebody in who's got a bit of a different viewpoint on the Overwatch League and various subjects to that. So this is why it's going to be very interesting. But the first topic I guess we can talk about is probably going to be the Overwatch World Cup, in particular the viewership for it. The viewership wise, I think they reached 200k. I'm not counting the Chinese viewerships.
No, it was actually
200k concurrent.
300.
No, it was 300k across all streams on Twitch. Yeah, which was a surprise to most people. I think I remember seeing an interview with Monty. I can't remember who did it, and even he had to admit a bit of surprise about the fact that the viewership was up so high. I think it exceeded most people's expectations because the previous peak, I think, was the previous season of the previous World Cup. Yeah, yes, which was like 240 or something, 220, 240, something like that.
It's almost like there was some sort of a promotional force that was put behind this tournament. It wasn't denied in some ways to all those tournaments between the last World Cup and this World Cup.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
But anyway, stay hired
in the game.
Stay hired, everyone. Keep employed. I'm here to say the things you can't.
I don't think promotion entirely was the reason for the high viewership, though. Surely not.
Just pure tribalism.
There's also a lot of plebs who just support their country and all that stuff, you know.
Like me, exactly. Like it does work. It does work, honestly. Like you can shrug your shoulders, but I mean, it gets the viewership at the end of the day.
But I'm an idiot. You know, you can shrug your shoulders, but at the end of the day, I'm an idiot.
You can shrug your shoulders, but I'm a moron. You know,
this idiot bet $50 on UK winning against Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Look what that got me.
Well, if you need any more proof of his level of intelligence, you should blindly bet with the UK the entire time.
Speaking of which, by the way, I want to ask you this. Is it just me, or is Sweden the hardest done by team in this entire tournament? Because due to that other side of the bracket being so stacked, everyone just made out like, oh, it doesn't matter who goes from the other side of the bracket. Like, I thought Sweden actually looked fucking good in this tournament. Like, I think they would have done way better against South Korea if they got to...
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they would have done better had they got to the final. But I do think that the other side of the bracket was...
Yeah, but that's why I say hard done by, though, because we have no idea what would have happened if you'd have had... I mean, for a start off, Sweden did beat France, but we have no idea if USA had played Sweden. You know, the problem is the storyline was set up in a weird way where normally it's the opposite. If you finish higher than the other guy, automatically you get the props. But in this weird setting, they got like almost no props because first of all, lost to Canada, who no one expected to do well, and then they had the easy side of the bracket, right?
Yeah, I feel a little bit the same thing about France.
After seeing Misfits, all the dicks in the world for the last year, I actually liked seeing Swedish people play successful Overwatch.
The issue
I thought the same thing about
the whole episode, by the way. So just buckle in.
Yeah, I thought the same thing about France though when they started, because they're playing against a Chinese team that had was essentially a crippled roster. They had like 4 people that couldn't get there because of visa issues. So they're able to get past them. Then they face South Korea, who they're expected to lose to anyway. So this is like the last run of Rogue, and they've got a team that everyone's expecting them to beat. And if they don't, there's some serious issues going to be raised for the team. And then a team that they're expected to lose to, which they did, and then they go on to the 3rd place match. And it's kind of this recurring theme of Rogue v Misfits in the scene for a while, though it's not really quite Misfits. And that in itself was a pretty good game. They lost that one, so it was hardly the last hurrah that it could have been as well if the bracket had been slightly different.
Yeah. I don't have
good contribution. Yeah, I mean, we pretty much covered it, didn't we? I guess we can still get to the point at hand, I guess. Viewership. How much do you think that this is going to affect then the Overwatch League coming into this? Because people weren't expecting the viewership to be so high for the World Cup. And then, we've come out with a lot of casual viewership. Do you think that's going to be able to transfer back over to the Overwatch League or not, Harsha?
I mean, they'll promote it for sure as they were promoting the World Cup, but like, I think it definitely won't be around 200, 300K, I don't think. Like, I feel a lot of people were watching it just because it was the World Cup and also just because it was BlizzCon.
Yeah.
It does seem like it'll be difficult to be able to maintain that momentum across, because I think it was in some sense a beautiful storm that came together of people tuning in because they had hyped up that the Spectator system was so much better, at the same time as the fact that people are all tuning in to support whatever country they came from, or come from rather. At the same time as they really push it because at the moment it's their premier product before the Overwatch League actually starts. So I think the three things kind of came together to make a real big spike. But it shows that the viewership or the interest itself is actually there, whether they'll be able to get all of those through. And you've got to remember as well that for the majority of the Overwatch League, it's not playoffs, it's a league system. Yeah. So I think it would be totally unreasonable to expect to get 300k for basically any regular season game.
There's also the problem though, like, first of all, the fact that the scene has been so limited for big tournaments means people were like gagging for a big tournament. So I think that helps. Like, for example, we found this in Counter-Strike. If you have like, you know, only your major, for example, is in a massive stadium and has like, you sold the tickets and 10,000 seats or whatever, you could do that like every 3 months. But if you try and do that every month, you will never get as many like live spectators, as many people on street. You could have the exact same match. You could have like a rematch of the final of the major, but if it's at the non-major, and it's a month later, you know, half the people won't go to the live game and then half the people won't watch online, you know. There's a certain type of casual viewer only wants to tune into the biggest event and is the most casual. And then I think you also have to throw in that, like, obviously you can never quite know what the real numbers from China were, but I think that's an area where you have to worry for Overwatch League because you're not going to have the same amount of Chinese people watching like random Overwatch League games that have nothing to do with the Chinese players, for example. I mean, I would just expect they won't be tuning in. That's obviously a fiercely nationalistic country. I think for South Korea, it's not as big a deal. You know, a lot of them will watch. But then you have to also factor this in. People who are Korean are spoiled because they have their own league. So they're used to watching, like, one of the genius things about the way they run all the OGN type leagues in Korea is the game normally starts at like 5 p.m. local time. They don't start the game at like 9 a.m. like all the LAN tournaments do in the West. You know, where if you're at school, you fucked, aren't you? So I think while Koreans in theory should watch the best Korean teams in Overwatch League, I don't think some of them are going to wake up if the game's at like 4 a.m. in Korea and you've got work at 8 a.m. So that's the downside. I could see a couple of ways that the viewership won't hit the same maxes, especially not early.
It is set up like that as well. It's set up so that it's kind of replicating the OGN system over in the West Coast. So it's like it starts at, you know, between 2 p.m. at the very earliest games where they try and shove the European team, the Korean team that represents London into that slot. But in general, I think they start at like 7, 8 a.m. for the Korean and Chinese viewers.
It's because if you like the only two regions you can sort of take care of is like if you make NA start early enough, you can get European people because not only will they like watch because it's Western players, but they'll also stay up a little bit later. Like Europeans don't complain if they have to stay up to 2 a.m. to watch a really good game. Problem is, it's impossible to make the time zones work for Korea and USA and Europe. Just look at all the episodes of OverSight we didn't film. Shot a bloody crystal there. Shot across the bow.
And I think people forget how large the fucking Pacific Ocean is when they look at the time zones and they're trying to sync it up. Because if you do have it really late in America, trying to match Korea and China, you've got the entire Pacific Ocean that would be beautiful if someone wants to take a ship out there and watch it. It'd be prime time for them. But it's still just like late morning or midday where everyone's at school and at work and stuff. But just to touch on a point previously where you said about the Chinese viewership, that peak of 300k was actually without the Chinese viewership. With it, it was on 840k reported viewers. But I never know. I never know.
So here's a question.
About Chinese viewership.
Here's a question for you: are there Chinese streams for Overwatch League? You don't know.
You know, I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
No one knows that.
One of the interesting things, I'm not sure if this is like actually part of like Korean culture or something, but when I've noticed that like whenever I want to watch an Apex VOD, I can click on it and I see the views and it's always like in the like upper tens of thousands. So I don't know if Koreans actually just end up watching the VOD a lot of the time for Apex. And
I think actually that's a lot of the Western viewers. I think the reason the Apex VODs and the Apex VODs do have ridiculous viewership is because I think a lot of the Western fans just watch the VODs afterwards. Because Apex in general, at the beginning, the first couple of seasons had comparatively mental viewership for the finals. I think they peaked the season 2 finals where it was Lunatic High against Runaway, peaked at about 160k. Which was massive for a standalone tournament that isn't, you know, pushed really hard by Blizzard. Especially because all the other tournaments were doing like 30k at the time.
I think the bigger problem is the one that you brought up. It's just the format. Like League play, it's really hard to get people into League play. Like you notice, it's no coincidence that the most popular league is either like Premiership football or the NFL. Because you don't play that many games in theory. Like when it's the NBA, NHL, I even know like diehard fans who don't watch every game. It's just too many, you know. And also, here's another thing: they're not going to watch the games that are like most sports fans either watch their team or the marquee game for the week. No one's going to watch like, the fourth best game that's none of the teams that you support or care about. That's where the viewership, I think, will struggle. So, for example, like as much as people think that they've gone a really cynical route and like Boston and recruited like Western players, I think their gamble is going to be tested in the first season, because if that team's shit, no one's going to watch their game.
Yeah.
I think
go on.
Well, I think one of the other issues is that it's 6 months long, so it's like it kind of exacerbates the problem where you have a ton of games that are spread out over a long period of time. So like viewership might just remain low over the entire time, or just start dipping more and more.
Like, I actually have a theory on this, okay? I've never actually made a full video about it. I've referenced it loads of times on like my League of Legends talk show, but that'll be so long ago no one will remember. But I actually have a theory that I hate the fact that in esports history, everyone agrees as a consensus that Riot Games like revolutionized things, and they knew best, because what they did is that in season 2 of League of Legends, they had no LCS, right? It was just an open circuit, like you had in Overwatch, like we had in CSGO, like they have in Dota. Any big tournament organizer runs a tournament in the game. There's one each month, and teams decide which ones they attend. And at the end, they use like a circuit point system in that game at the time to decide who made the world champion. And when they brought an LCS, obviously they just kneecapped all those tournaments, like practically all of them disappeared. And it just became LCS, which at the time was like you played like best of ones, and you played either like 2 a week or you played 4 on certain special weeks, right? And because the viewership went up over time, everyone just accepts, well, Riot knew best, right? Because, the viewership went up. What they don't seem to realize is there's no control group. We can never know if the viewership would have gone up in the following years, because League of Legends as a game got much bigger, by the way, like doubled and tripled player base, if it had gotten bigger with big tournaments. Because my theory's always been that while, yes, like having amazing production value and consistent storylines, there is something to this, I mean, you can see how it helps. It's no coincidence that the best tournaments in Overwatch have been Apex, which is not a league, it's a tournament. Because when there's a tournament, I just find it way more interesting entirely. Like, you always know where the team's at. You know what it has to do next to get to a certain point, or whether it's not gonna. The storylines almost create themselves. Whereas I feel like you have to almost kind of like just piece together pretty weak storylines in leagues until you get down to the nitty gritty of like, when who can make the playoffs, who can't, etc. Before that, it's hard to get as engaged, in my opinion. So I think actually, I personally always thought this. I thought what they should have done with LCS is, instead of having it be a league that lasted 3 months, I would have made it. I mean, remember the title of LCS is League Championship Series. It doesn't say anything about league as in a league thing. That means League of Legends, right? I would have had it be series. I would have taken the S part and made that the emphasis. And I'd have had it be like 3 months long, but it would be like 5 weekend tournaments spread out, And then the idea is automatically you'd have amazing storylines. Because imagine then, this happens in every league. There'll always be a team that starts really hot, and by the time you go into the first third, looks like, wow, they could win the league. And at the end of the league, they taper off, they don't do well, and at the end of the league, no one remembers that team was ever good, because the final result's all that matters. If that had been 5 series, imagine they came along, rocked the first 2 series. They won the first 2 weeks. So let's say like 2 tournaments over, let's say 2 or 4 weeks, right? So you have time to practice. Let's say they won these 2 little like week-long tournaments or whatever. Now the storyline's amazing if they don't win the future ones and someone overcomes them and someone beats them in the semi-final. I think you actually take the best of what LAN tournaments do and something of like a series league format, and I think you would exacerbate the better qualities of it personally, but just my own bias.
Well, I mean, I think one of the other issues that you brought up is like storylines don't remain consistent, and the other thing that like exacerbates that is that you have meta shifts during the tournament, or during the league, I guess. And those,
which is also why I like the tournament format again, because, for example, let's say you do some meta-defining innovation, you get rewarded, you win that tournament that week for that tournament, 2 months later, when the meta changes so that your like star player now can't play his heroes and is completely crippled, no one ever remembers you were a good team.
Yeah.
No names mentioned.
The discussion here between the differences in format and how one might peak over the other in terms of viewership, I think, have been kind of said before, and I'm sure we'll touch on them later on as well. But it's more putting them in the perspective of how we think the Overwatch World Cup will now affect our predictions, or what would be considered good or bad for Overwatch League, that I think is most interesting in light of Overwatch World Cup.
What does that mean?
Well, I think you have to set what people never define, right? What would be good viewership or bad viewership when they talk about Overwatch League?
That's because it's fucking depressing in Overwatch. You're just trying to stay away from the numbers. You just go, look at these massive teams. Robert Kraft, you like NFL, don't you? You don't start going, look, how do we get to 12,000 viewers? Yeah, that's depressing.
But when you look at the Overwatch World Cup numbers, they are much more than people expected. So I think people coming into Overwatch League at the beginning were saying, you know, Contenders peaked at something like 40k for the playoffs of Contenders that had some of the similar teams in it. You know, it had Misfits who are going to be Florida, it had Dallas Envious who are going to be Dallas Fuel in it as well. And so people's expectations are set fairly low because none of these tournaments have been promoted. The viewership's been small. But now either people's assumptions of what would have been good, I think, are going to be met or have a higher likelihood of being met, or you have to rearrange your assumptions because this is such a huge peak in viewership compared to all the other tournaments.
Like, I legitimately don't know this, so I'm asking. Like, was Contenders advertised in the client or on like the Blizzard website or anything?
I believe they did some advertising for it, but it was very minimal. It was nothing like what they did for
But did they do that for the World Cup? They went all out.
They went all out.
Yeah, they went all out. It was in client, it was in the bottleneck client. Emails were sent out as well, actually.
Emails.
Emails.
My grandma, I know my grandma watched it, so she was on that. She was simultaneously sending $8,000 to a Nigerian scammer and watching the Overwatch World Cup. Doesn't even
forward, RE. Watch my team in the Overwatch World Cup. But yeah, I think
I could have made a way better joke. I couldn't have tied in, you know, scamming some elderly person who doesn't know about video games. I should have tied it back into Robert Kraft.
Could have.
But enough about that. Thought I did in a way, didn't I, in the end?
But the viewership for Overwatch League itself has, I think people always like to focus on what could make it better or worse compared to where it would naturally be if there was any kind of control group. But people rarely try and pin it down to a number, as in what they would actually expect. I think having seen the Overwatch World Cup, you can now try and pin it down to a number, which I think will be... And having said it would be somewhere around 100k for the regular season games, everyone would have said that was a massive achievement going into the Overwatch League. I think that now seems to be somewhere around a realistic expectation to have some of the better games be sat at like 100k for the regular season.
Especially if they go all out with it, to be honest. If they go all out with it again, which you're assuming they are because this is the thing that they've put all their money on, right?
If they don't, then it's time to be really pissed. If they don't do anything for the Overwatch League.
I can see it. I can see it happening for some of the games. Dallas Fuel, especially these teams of long-standing fans, and especially the Optic fans, the Houston Outlaws. They're fucking mental. I found out from Cass and Dota. They are crazy. I did an Optic game. This brand new org just entered the scene, and the viewership shot up to about 25k. This shitty little mid-tier tournament, and none of them had a clue what was going on in the game.
They were all tuning in for Bren. That's actually what it was.
There are some serious mental defectives in that group. Like, all you need to know is, so in Counter-Strike, we had this happen. They came into Counter-Strike in, I think, early 2016, and they got a team which was like, it was okay. You know, it was maybe like 20th best team in the world or something, you know, not amazing by any stretch of the imagination. And by the end of the year, the team had actually like made the roster moves to become pretty good in Counter-Strike, and it eventually had a massive upset win in a really big tournament. It won the second season of E-League. And it was actually, even in the final, it was still a massive upset. They beat Astralis, who actually went on to become the dominant team for the next few months. But before the final happened, there was all these people. When I tweeted, you know, like Astralis is going to win this final, obviously. All the responses from these flares that were like Optic flares were like, nah, you don't understand. Optic are clutch as fucking finals. I was like, yeah, but those are different people in a different game. What? It's not like a hive mind, you know. Well, for the fans, maybe it is, but fucking hell, like, it's different players.
They were actually arguing that the Call of Duty Optic team is so clutch in finals it would seep across.
Mentally ill, and yeah, basically that was like their logic. And they were like, "Listen, you got to understand, Hex doesn't recruit losers." Like, fuck it. Good job. I stayed in clear of that NRG team a while ago. Hold.
But the see, the thing that I want to get to here though is that if coming into the Overwatch League, you had put yourself in a position of, if coming into the Overwatch League, they had said their first season is going to get 100k viewers for the regular season games. That to me doesn't seem too bad. And yet the road here was so littered with tournaments that were horrific. Was the only thing they had to do was actually advertise? Was the viewer base there the whole time? Well, is this some part of like some 7D chess that by only promoting the World Cup and the other major tournament, they're going to be able to just feed all the people who are like mega hyped to watch the teams into the Overwatch League?
It can't only Well,
go ahead.
What I was going to say is it can't only be advertising, because there's also the prestige of BlizzCon, the fact that it's like a one-off tournament, like World Cup, where it happens once a year. Like, I don't think
but isn't this part of like giving them some credit of their plan? No, I don't mean advertising. I mean the fact that they quashed all of the other stuff and absolutely stamped out their community tournaments created the prestige for the Overwatch League. Because otherwise, I mean, if they had been pushing Apex or Contenders or whatever, you'd be like, okay, I've seen like most of these teams actually before. There's only some new rosters, and most of the new rosters are actually not that good. So this is just like, sure, it's a coalescence of talent.
I also think one thing that people like really underrate as well is people, for some bizarre reason with Overwatch, really did take the tack that like unless they could enjoy the first game they watched, then it was unwatchable and there's no point ever even trying. Like as though in life there's no learning curve to anything. Like listen, I could definitely believe that esports fans have eschewed anything in life that involves a learning curve, like philosophy, mathematics, social tact, etc. But believe it or not, some esports games take a while to warm up to. I mean, StarCraft 2 looked fucking terrible to me as someone who came from Broodwall. Like the fights are garbage. It looks like people just move into each other and there's no micro whatsoever. In the early days, it was really bad, but over time, it became massively popular. League of Legends is probably the ultimate example. Because I always say this, League of Legends as a spectator esports game is one of the biggest failures esports has ever had. Their conversion rate is significantly worse than every major esport. I think they get something like, I think their stat was like they get like a fourth or a third of the people who play the game ever watch the game. Yeah. So basically what they do is they just brute force their number. They just go, we've got 100 million people watch. So guess what? We've got 5 million watching the game now. Well, that's not exactly a major success, is it? That means actually the majority of people who play League of Legends under no circumstances want to watch a fucking game of League of Legends. So guess what? It's really hard to view, isn't it? If you've never played League of Legends, it's super hard to know what's going on and what the interactions of the spells are. So I think people really overrated that. Like I also think, unfortunately, a downside was so many of the people who said that argument were League of Legends fans who, I mean, it's pretty obvious they're like mad, triggered / uncomfortable / jealous of Overwatch existing, as far as I can tell.
That's something that I don't really understand in general with esports fans, is the fact that they want desperately for all other esports to fail.
Mad, isn't it?
I have no idea. Like, what is
you can
wrong
enjoy
with some of
two
people?
if you want.
Yeah,
you can watch two of them.
Enjoy 2, 3, maybe even 4 if you really put your mind to it. But like, they're like, no. It's not League of Legends. I want it to fail. It's going to crash.
I've got the best example ever for you, Bren. So back when I was a kid, so 90s obviously here, you were all just being conceived. Right. In the 90s, I used to love console games. And so I used to be super into like the Nintendo and the Mega Drive, Genesis for you American pleb. Right. So when these consoles were out, these were the first consoles that had the real like console wars. Someone either gets the Genesis for Christmas or they get the Super Nintendo. And all people did was the most petty tribalism ever, where they would just be like, whichever one they had, they love that one, and the other one's shit anyway, and they don't want to talk to anyone who has it. They don't care about the games. They don't want to play them. And what I never understood about it was sometimes they'd go like way beyond even like what would be a reasonable opinion. Like I understand if you don't own that console, you might in your mind want to be like, well, I probably don't want the game anyway because you can't play it. But people would go so outrageous. Like, for example, when the PlayStation came out, when they brought out the Nintendo 64, the Nintendo 64's launch game was Super Mario 64, which is one of the best. To this day, it's a fucking amazing game. Like, so technologically good, amazing, like, gameplay. But the problem is, because the Nintendo 64 came out after the PlayStation, it was a more advanced piece of technology. So you actually couldn't replicate some of the 3D platformer elements in a PlayStation game. But people tried. They made a game for the PlayStation called Spyro the Dragon. Ooh. Now, listen, if Mario didn't exist, Spyro's an okay game. It's all right. It's decent. You had Spyro, you had Crash Bandicoot. These are all right games. They're all right. But anyone, and people did this, who tries telling you, I don't even need a Nintendo. Shit, I've got Spyro the Dragon. So just kill yourself. Like, you actually are objectively wrong in every level. And you've literally gone all in on a fucking shit dragon that can't even have proper 3D. You are a loser. Why not do what I do, which is instead of forcibly buy games like Spyro the Dragon, save that little £30, save another £30. Eventually, you could just buy both consoles and get the games that are good. That's the analogy, right? How about just get all the good games? So how about when it's a really good tournament for League of Legends, watch that. And if there's a really good tournament in another game, watch that one as well. It's a crazy concept, I'm like Martin Luther King or something.
What a
people aren't ready for these kinds of
Except I'm loyal to my wife. Look it up.
Yeah.
This. All right, let's move on quickly.
I can stay here all day, baby. As he used to say to his mistress.
I was going to make a point here. What the hell was it? Jesus. let's go back to the point about. I genuinely was going to make a point about.
It's about viewership for the Overwatch League.
Viewership for the Overwatch League, and how you made a point about League of Legends about how the fact that the player base doesn't actually convert over to watching it.
Yes,
I actually feel like that's the biggest success for the World Cup. The reason being is because the amount of casual players there are for Overwatch is ridiculous. It's absolutely crazy.
More than any other game, as far as I can tell, if you broke it down.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's nuts.
Doesn't help that nothing esports ever penetrates the fucking sanctum of r/Overwatch.
Yeah.
That's. We all know the problems with that one, but pretend that's not the problem.
Comp Overwatch on the sidebar. We won't mention that again, but. No, but seriously though, and I feel like that was the biggest success story. Was I think they converted a lot of those casuals over to watching it because they just had their countries to root for, right? That was the whole idea behind it. I actually feel like that's where the bulk of the viewership probably came from.
What, was just from people supporting their countries? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're actually going to follow through and watch the Overwatch League.
No, exactly.
Because they would have to attach themselves to a team. See, this was my issue with it when they brought up the World Cup and pushed it as their big feature months and months and months ago, right at the beginning, was that if you're going to have a major tournament like this that you're running as standalone tournament, then I thought back then, why not push it with some of the big teams with the storylines that already exist? And so as you're going into the Overwatch League, people have already attached themselves in. So maybe it doesn't have the biggest draw at the beginning, but it seems like the engagement would carry on more.
That's the flaw also with the brands. Like, there's two ways you could go. Either, like you're saying, you could have Envious and Rogue as like entire teams versus, Lunatic High, and they could be in the league, in which case you carry over all the storylines.
Yeah.
Or the other way is, even if it's the same squads that we have now, they're called Cloud9 and they're called Optic, and I feel like that sets you back. You can overcome it, sure, but it's like you're unnecessarily giving yourself all these extra hurdles you have to clear, and you have to clear them in these cases because you have to succeed.
Yeah, but then now looking back at it, if they do manage to convert, as you're saying, Brad, the more casual audience, which does seem to be some kind of big, just untapped mine of potential there for them. If they manage to take that through by running the World Cup every year, which then bleeds people through, if that serves to be, or rather proves itself as a good route for the casual audience getting invested in the esports scene, then it's worked perfectly, right? That's their plan right from the beginning has worked to perfection.
You don't even have to do
It didn't seem like it would do at the beginning, especially with the format of the first World Cup, but it seems like it's worked this time pretty well.
Well, what you can do is you can just do in-game loot, where people that play Overwatch casually definitely love in-game loot.
Like, you can do both, I mean.
Do both, obviously. But yeah, there are like tons of ways they can draw.
So you're referring to copying what CS did, basically?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, we have the drops at the majors, which is another reason definitely why the viewership goes up for the majors.
Without the game.
Yeah. Without the count, without any way of buying actual loot boxes or whatever, fighting money or trading them between people.
Listen, Harsha, you do realize you're in a group chat with 3 people from England. Like, we don't care about gambling, mate. It's not a problem to us. It's not some mortal sin,
Bren bet his suit jacket
and
had to eat it or something.
He
bet that Sweden would lose against the UK, and then bet after everyone had told him that the patch had hit South Korea pretty hard and they were going to have a rough route through the playoffs, bet they wouldn't drop a map. Like, this guy does actually have a problem.
I gave him advice for all of these things too.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
I was telling him he was an idiot at the beginning. Anyway,
it's just blind nationalism. That's what it was in my eyes. I just saw UK and I was like, this is the first time we've had a UK team in any sort of esports for so long. I was like, I gotta root for them.
Sure. You're the target audience, actually.
I actually
More so
am.
than anybody. You're the target audience.
Yeah.
You know what?
What does that say about our podcast?
I was disappointed with how far Bren went, because when I walked into the stadium, I was looking around for somebody wearing like the most ridiculous UK getup that I could find. So I went up and grabbed a guy by the shoulders, and I thought it was Bren. It turns around.
Why would you do that?
No, it's fucking Stylosa.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so it was okay, but it could have
not just some random kid in the crowd that you got up to and hugged.
And then I found Bren later. He was just wearing
Weinstein out here.
It's a dangerous kind of plan.
You don't know how that shit can work out nowadays. I'd watch out for you.
Bren didn't go.
Yeah, I didn't go all out.
Yeah.
I bought face paint for it. I was gonna have like the Union Jack on my face. I was gonna go all out. Firstly, I got absolutely shit-faced on the first day, so I forgot the face paint. I left it at an Airbnb somewhere.
I feel like getting the face paint on while you were shit-faced and just leaving it on throughout the night would have made the best impression. Like, that would have been the classic UK
Just
fan.
wake up and
he just turns up with a beer and like crusted shit all over his face. And roughly like the St. George flag or something.
And then obviously when UK gets eliminated, just start punching fuckers. Start attacking them with mobs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he tried to conduct psychological warfare instead because he instantly switched to a South Korea jersey.
Yeah, and the beauty of it was, the beauty of the face paint is it's the exact same colours to the South Korean flag. So I didn't
know they had a St. George cross.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you just painted a Pepsi logo on your face instead of smush it around into it.
You know, Great Britain, we've conquered that many countries, you know. I think, God, can you list them off, the amount of ones that they've got that little flag in the corner?
Yeah,
South Korea is one of them.
Don't think.
It is.
Don't think so.
Probably is. We own at least most of the world.
We know how.
Listen, all I'm going to say is this, Sideshow. If the UK hasn't in some way conquered South Korea, then why is the UK franchise all Korean players? Answer me that. Yes. Checkmate.
I think that would be the opposite way around. I think South Korea has well and truly conquered the UK.
No, they're our slaves. They belong to us.
I see. they belong to the North American franchise. It's not even the UK.
Doesn't matter.
Nah, America was our child at one point. But should we continue on? Should we go past this point? The next point I wanted to talk about was the actual spectator features. I mean, we mentioned it briefly as part of the reason why they were, you know, waiting and waiting for the World Cup to be their sort of premier tournament where all the viewership is going to be on it. Are you guys as impressed with the spectator tools from what you've seen so far? I've got a few gripes of it, but I don't know. Josh, Sideshow?
The first game that I watched, I thought they'd completely ruined the entire thing. I realized that I was coming into it having watched an entire year where I was spending most of my day watching the previous system. So obviously I was going to have difficulty. But when I came in and it was the light blue color of Misfits, or the Sweden, against the white of Team UK, horrible. And I was like, I have no idea what's going on, because it takes some time to adjust to it. And I think this is a weird thing as well, is that it takes time to adjust even from just being a casual player, because things look very different. You have to be able to recognize what a Transcendence now looks like, or Lucio, the fact that you have to look at above his head to see whether he's speed boost or healing rather than looking at the circle and the color on the floor. And the fact that a lot of the stuff like the Mercy Beam is no longer color coded, individual projectiles are no longer color coded. It takes a while to adjust. Having said that, when I watched the whole of the World Cup, by the end of it, I did prefer the new system. I definitely think there's tweaks that should be made to it. Not even could, but really should be made to it. But overall, it does seem like it's clearer, because one of the big things with Overwatch, I think, was not even that it was difficult to learn what was going on or difficult to look at who you're supposed to. There was just so much graphical shit on the screen. It was just so cluttered, right? You couldn't really tell what was going on in the middle of a team fight. I think they did a decent job of being able to clear most of that up.
I mean, when you say it took a long time, it will take me literally a long time, because I'll need another lifetime and reincarnation, because I'm colorblind, mate. So if you have light blue with blue, then you may as well just be saying fuck you to me, because I'm never going to be able to see the difference. So that part's tough. I'm not a fan of that. Like, I actually think with that one, I know why people said color-coded is the way to go. I get it. But I actually thought, I mean, this is just me, because there's so much like overload of what goes on in an Overwatch game. Personally, I would make the spectator client very different to the in-game client. So obviously I wouldn't do anything in-game that would mess up how players see it, but I would like it if you did something along the lines of like actual visual metaphors, like something that's going to like stun you but slowly or whatever would be like a zigzag line going into, you know, not just colors. I would do another element that'd be intuitive to it. But I think it's pretty good, the new one they've got now, though. It's better.
I think an issue with doing that, because I think that's the same in some of the MOBAs, right? I don't really have much of a MOBA background, but does League or Dota have kind of different effects on what's going towards you, depending on the effect that?
Yeah, but theirs aren't really like that. Mine would be more like, it'd be like classes of thing, you know. So you'd know what like a healing spell was, and you'd know what like a speed boost was. You know, it'd have some sort of visual metaphor.
Well, they originally color coded it, right? In Overwatch, when you play it normally, most of the stuff that's like yellow is for healing, and there's different ways of color coding that. And that's the route they went, instead of color coding by teams, like games like TF2 have done in the past, where everything's color coded by teams, but you have much less projectiles, so everything's still very easily visible. I think
to me the bigger issue
with like zigzags and stuff though is that it's just more graphical clutter. Like you've got a Tesla beam and stuff, and if someone fires a sleep dart, now it's zigzagging through the air and stuff like that. I think it'd be difficult just to tell.
But you can't. But you can't even see the sleep dart if the guy misses and you're not looking through the POV of that character.
Yeah. The moment the sleep
you have no idea what happens.
There's sound cues as well.
Yeah, but
there's like a 10-man fight.
Yeah, but a lot of
the sleep dart sound cue is like zip.
Yeah, it's also like a lot of the time.
Sounds like me on zipping.
It's not going to be.
Does that put people to sleep?
In the grand scheme of things.
Well, I usually give them those special pills.
Okay. Here we go. Right, we're getting into deep, dark territory now.
Cosby, yeah. One of my favorites, classic of American culture, Bill Cosby.
Big fan of him, of course. Spectator improvements. Harsha, anything to add on to this?
Other than the colors, like, I don't know why they're so focused on actually doing white as the I don't know if it's home or away, but whatever. I think
away.
Yeah, but if you did,
away color,
I know it's traditionally white in sports, but I think if they did black, it would be way easier to see the distinction. There's also
Is it traditionally white in sports?
Yeah.
I thought they just tried for a contrast difference. I thought it was like whatever the home team had, was it light or dark? The away team would just have.
No, in a lot of like American sports, they have white.
Yeah, it's like white plus their other colors as well, like highlights.
Okay.
But done in college football, college American football.
Just all.
I think it is. Someone told me it was mainly. That's where it derived from. I could just be making this up, but I'm pretty sure somebody told me that's why they probably went with it.
It might be. But the other thing I thought was a bit weird or suspect at least was that they had white names for both teams, so you couldn't really tell the difference between them.
Well, like Jeffrey and Jaspel and Mike. What do you mean?
I mean that the names were colored white.
Obviously, I'm solid. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, they need to find some way to make a distinction there, and on the health bars as well.
Yeah,
my general consensus.
The health bars and the white.
I also think like the most. To me, I think beyond even like the graphical noise and the fact that in theory, like literally 12 people can be doing things all at once, I still think the biggest limiting factor to getting newer people in is all the game modes, personally. If it was one game mode and you just learned that game mode, you would pick up things so quick as to what's going on. But like, even every time I switch between them, mentally, it's hard to like reset and then figure out what am I looking for here. And so I can only imagine how hard it is for some of the observers, because some of those game modes are not suited to catching all what's happening.
King of the Hill.
It's impossible, isn't it?
King of the Hill is one of the worst game modes to spectate, in my opinion, because there's not even like, for some of the fights, there's not even an objective. Where on the first fight, it's just
It's normally in the middle. Actually, it's just being in control of the point.
Oh, okay.
That's the objective. Yeah. There is an objective.
I mean, in the sense that the progression is different than on something like Payload, where you're moving the payload forward, or something like 2CP, where you're trying to capture specific points, and like one team's on attack and the other team's on defense, right? But specifically,
if they introduce different game modes to competitive though, or even just as they expand the map pool, they have to limit it. And I can definitely, if it wasn't for control being the best way of settling a tiebreaker, because it's one of the only modes where it's impossible to end in a draw. Yeah. I mean, they could do it with their escort maps as well, but they tend not to. But if it wasn't for the fact that it's so good at breaking ties, I'd say just remove it completely. And I think that a lot of people feel very similar, because the game mode is the most different from the others. The rest are either you're pushing a payload or you're capturing a point. And once you captured it, it's not like it's flipping over to the other team or whatever. And the hybrid is just a combination of the two. So I think it'd be very feasible just to have the 3 game modes there and have, a collection of maps built around those. I don't think that would be too confusing for people. And I like the fact that we have because I don't think the Overwatch depth of each individual map at the moment is deep enough really just to have a single map mode. Like if we only had hybrid, I mean hybrid's actually probably the best of the 3, but if you only had escort, for example, and it was like Dorado, Route 66, these kind of maps that were just played again and again and again, I feel like you'd be lacking so much depth that the actual capture point and the assault stuff brings to you.
I would agree if you and me coded the game, but this is a game that's going to have like $500 million invested into it by franchises and who knows how much in development. Like, could they have not foreseen some of these things by perhaps viewing history before repeating the same mistakes?
It's too late for that now.
That is the motto of the Overwatch League, I believe. That's season 1, right? It's too late for that now. We must go live.
They started with a preseason, so it's 2017.
It is
2017. It's going to be happening. Wow. I mean, to go back to the original point we were talking about graphics. It was a while ago now. I mean, we were talking about game modes and whatnot, but I don't have anything interested to add on to that. But one of my biggest gripes about League of Legends.
Scrap that then. Don't know whatever you're going to talk about.
This is. I mean, have you seen Through the Grapevine before? I just go on these weird.
With
I just
great
go
hosting
all over the
comes
place.
Great power.
Exactly. And
with really terrible hosting still comes great power, which is a large unfortunate point.
I lead a dictatorship here. But League of Legends, like I know the MOBA game mode. I play a lot of Dota. I watch a lot of Dota. And I've always found it so bizarre how the graphics they have on the screen take up, like, I don't know if this has changed, but when I was watching Worlds recently, it doesn't look like it had changed. But you've got all these numbers at the bottom, you've got the items and whatnot. It's a lot of clutter on the screen all at once, and it is one of the worst cases of like spectating I've ever seen. Because I get a grasp of the game, 3 lanes, right? You've got the objectives like the Baron and the dragons and whatnot. Yeah, exactly. But it's just awful the way they display it. Surely there's some better ways of doing it.
I don't know, man. I actually don't mind that, because when you watch like League of Legends and they have that panel at the bottom, the panel at the bottom doesn't really, I think, affect it that much, because the viewing experience is like from the top, and it's the same where everyone plays from, and in general they can zoom out a little bit further, I think, than you actually play in. So they can basically capture everything in that little window that they have. And League of Legends is like, its items play a huge part in the game. It would be the equivalent of having Overwatch, like a nice little panel at the bottom that showed you where all the cooldowns were for everything. So if you realize like, oh, a sleep would be absolutely vital right now, but you have no idea whether sleep's actually active,
that would actually
so
be
you
cool,
would just
think,
like glance down at the bottom. The thing is, in Overwatch it'd be impossible, because there's no way you can capture all of the info.
No, but here's the
little
thing.
bar like that, but in League it works. So I don't think it's that bad.
In a world where you could modify these, why wouldn't that be an option for the observer? Like, he could enable just the Ana cooldowns or something, so you could show for a key team fight when you land, you know, with what's up, what's available.
Now I think that might be available right now. With their spectator improvements, they also added like a kill feed, but for abilities that have been used. I don't know, I haven't seen it, but we saw it flash up on the stream a few times when they kind of fudged the observing new system and everything. So when it came up, you could see it had a couple of different tabs. Presumably one of those will allow you to see which abilities are active.
Because that's the problem in the example Bren's given it. It's true, 99% of the game that's a team fight, you don't need that, but you do need it for the items. Like, you have to know if someone has like a Zhonya's or a BKB or whatever. You have to know if it's available, because then you judge how well they played the fight. The problem is, this is another area. It's why actually one of my first Overwatch videos was kind of like wrecking all the people who just assumed that like it would never be watchable. Because I obviously drew the comparisons to League of Legends, because another one is the fact that like, even to this day, because League of Legends engine has only very minorly been upgraded over the years, to this day, it has terrible visual noise. Like, visual noise where there's no proportion even. Like, a healing spell that does a little bit of healing, if you didn't know the game, can look better than the AD carry who's just doing auto hits but's wrecking everyone's damage completely. There's no like rhyme or reason to what the visual noise is, and it's a massive clutter when there's team fights. Like, it's not as bad now just because of some of the champions they don't use. But like, for example, if anyone knows the champion Zyra, which does the ult, basically makes this weird circle with all these vines, it throws everyone up. It covers the entire team fight. So like, soon as that's thrown down with other things on it, you can't see anything. Like, I don't care. I put it this way, in League of Legends, a really popular feature is they have some of the best LCS casters, so like Jat or Deficio, and they have a feature where they take one team fight and they'll replay it, and they go slow-mo, and they'll show you the different points of view, like not literally points of view, but you know, like the different aspects of what this guy was trying to accomplish. And what you learn every time you watch one of these is it doesn't matter how much you know about the game, you are not getting 99% of that when you watch it again. You're just going like, oh, and the colors, and he's red, and oh, he's died. Yay, the winners. Like, you don't know what the fuck's going on at all. Anyone who says they do is just like lying, or just knows so much about the game they can intuit what's going on. They don't have to visually see it, you know?
Well, I don't think that's limited to League of Legends. I think that's also an issue in Overwatch where you can see a fight and you don't really see the entirety of it.
Yes.
I think that'd be
a problem,
That'd be a good segment for desks and stuff.
But the thing is, the important thing, really, is that people see it as a limiting factor in Overwatch, and yet people in League of Legends have got over it. Did they actually just ignore it in League of Legends? Are they just oblivious to it?
No,
did people at the beginning have difficulty with it and somehow find a way to get over it? What do you think was the stepping stone?
2 factors. Again, one, most people aren't watching League of Legends. Like, most people who even play the game, know the game, are not watching it.
Okay.
Like, I'd love to know how...
They still got a large amount of viewers to complain. They have enough to make a complaint.
Yeah, and then secondly, because so many people play the game, they don't have that problem. They're not like a casual viewer who just wants to watch the game. Yeah. So that's actually why I've always felt like people wondered why I made this bizarre comment early on when franchising was announced for NALCS. And I actually said I could see a world in which like the NALCS one is actually not worth the same money as buying the Overwatch League. And the reason why is because I actually think League is fairly capped out. I can't see where you're going to get the new viewers. Like, if you can't convince 2/3 of your own game to, how are you going to convince people who don't watch League of Legends or play it to watch the game? You're not. Whereas in Overwatch, like, first of all, they've got so far to go in just capping out on the people who play the game. And then beyond that, if you did a really good job with learning how to spectate and things that may yet be figured out, I could see the ceiling being higher eventually. Whereas I feel like League, they've reached a threshold there. Because that's the thing. Most people don't complain about League in that way. To this day, they don't complain. They're fine with it. So it's just a complaint of someone like me where I can say it because I'm more casual for those games. So I'm never going to be so in depth. I'll know literally what's happening in a mental context, you know.
Yeah, I think to your point about people buying into the Overwatch League as well, I think that it's like a calculated risk on their part, as in this has the potential to be massive if it's well executed compared to the NALCS, where you got a known quantity and the good stuff that comes with that, but also the bad stuff that comes with that, in that it doesn't have the same potential to grow, it seems. But in terms of the Spectator stuff that's going on at the moment, I do think they've made the right first steps. I'd be interested to see it from a casting, observing point of view, or as an analyst, to use the new replay system. Hopefully they release that as well as the statistics and stuff. The map. If they release that publicly, that would be great.
I want the map.
It most likely will be.
I don't know about that.
Like, they're not just going to keep this tucked away. Why would they?
They might, because they enjoy making things prestigious and Blizzard only.
They enjoy their tournament having all these numbers, and yours not, and then you not having replays.
Or just like third-party content creators in general. You know, if the only place you can get these really sick breakdowns is shoulder content in the Overwatch League, then I can definitely see a world in which Blizzard just lock it all up for themselves.
Sadly, they are another one of those developers that's gone that route where this quote apparently is apocryphal. He didn't actually say this, but there's a quote that's always attributed to Genghis Khan, where apparently he said that it's not enough that I win, others must lose. That's the way that it feels like Riot and Blizzard sometimes feel.
Yeah, it's
like a Mongolian dictator. How are you implying? Yeah.
It definitely, it does feel like that from some content creators' points of view as well. I know with the new stats API that's going to be released, the Winston's Lab guys are panicking right now because they've built their entire site around it, and it's very successful and people love it. And they've been offering kind of statistical analysis on the side, which when the Blizzard, if they ever release the Blizzard API or give it to the teams or something as well, they won't have been working with it in the same way that the Winston's Lab guys as well, but they'll be shut out because they're not actually working with the official thing. So it's all up in the air at the moment in terms of, but it's like that for this replay, or they call it replays. I think of it as demos because I cover the source system or whatever, but it's the entire game packaged up that you can look from any angle. Well, it looks sick when they use it as the live action replay in the World Cup.
You're talking about
that's a downloadable thing. No, for Overwatch.
That's literally a feature though, where you click on a kill in the kill feed is what they said, and then it takes you back to that point in time, and you control the perspective. I don't think it's actually a demo in like the entire sense of the word.
You don't think that they could set it up so that they would be able to download the file and run
whether they can do something, whether they will, is a chasm that we may not breach.
Yeah,
but I feel like for shoulder content, that would be breaking totally new ground in terms of analytical content you could create with that kind of stuff. Because at the moment, it's ridiculous. You have to look back over a casted VOD already, mute the casters, and therefore mute all of the sound effects.
You're dependent on
and then click around, and you're like, well, this guy actually in the top right-hand corner of your screen that's hiding behind a pillar was incredibly useful in this position. It'd be massive for people creating content.
I mean, the problem is
both ways for them.
Like logically, to people in the community, you would actually think to yourself, in fact, why doesn't Blizzard just work with Winston's Lab and find out things that they would want as well, and then collaborate with them since they already have a database? You would think so, but that's in the naive, idiot world of us in the community, where people like Harsha and Winston's Lab could send in an email tomorrow to Blizzard, and they'd be like, listen, we like fans and everything, but, this is about serious competitive stuff, We can't just let any old person come to BlizzCon. I don't know why I referenced BlizzCon there. Just any tournament.
Of course. I mean, we'll be getting to that in a little bit. I think we got.
Mate, I reckon if you asked most Blizzard devs about Winston's Lab, they'd think they were referring to the actual character.
No,
like lab.
No.
Well, I mean, I guess he was in a lab, but
you know what? They gave us a tour at the place where they're doing Overwatch League next year when we went to Contenders. They legitimately have like a janitorial room called Winston's Lab.
Okay.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, Winston's Lab. It's for repairing like
PCs and stuff,
technologies and stuff. Yeah.
I found that funny.
Yeah, I think the Winston's Lab guys found it funny as well.
The thing is, you're talking about the Winston's Lab stuff like it's a good system that they've got. I mean, it's very intelligent what they're doing, right? The software that's behind it, like they're literally ripping from the VODs and reading the kill feed, and that's how they're getting the information and the data, and then interpreting it into statistics. But it's so like long-winded. Like, why would Blizzard not just create their own system internally and get stats that way? And in Winston's Lab, it does miss a lot of stuff as well. The VODs when they're playing replays,
from my perspective, if you were someone who saw that there's people who are so hardcore into the game that they love to capture all that stuff, I'd say, why don't I work with these people and help them make my system really good, Well,
the other issue is that the people from Winston's lab had to think about what stats they think are important, like make up their own statistics kind of. So, like, wouldn't you want at least their input in whatever stat system you're going to make?
Yeah, that's the big thing, is that really if you create an API or something on Blizzard's end, it's just feeding you raw data. Yes. How you actually use that raw data, how you create like kills per ultimate or ult efficiency and these kind of statistics. I mean, sure, the raw damage, raw kills, raw deaths are going to be useful, but these statistics that combine other stats to produce more useful ones is what Winston's Lab's been doing for ages.
That was
and I can tell you, by the way,
that I think with the actual stats during the World Cup, if you paid attention to what was coming up, you had no point of reference as to why that stat was good. It was often just numbers.
It was just a raw number,
out.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas they always do it by like per 10 minutes or per whatever,
Yeah, exactly. That's actually one of the issues when it comes to stuff like stats, is that you actually have to know the game very well. The stats won't tell you what's important. So, for example, there's a bunch of other esports games where to this day they show utterly useless stats. Like in League of Legends, they'll just show like total damage done in a game, right? That takes into context nothing. It doesn't tell you what hero it was. Does that hero poke a lot? Does it have a long range thing? Does it have an ultimate that's like a one-off burst? Does it do a lot of things? It doesn't take into account like whether it scales. Like there's all these factors that you'd have to add in before you could get any clue whether they're actually having a bigger damage bar meant that you did a better job than the other guy. Then in Counter-Strike, we had the worst one ever because from day one, they used to flash up the headshot percentage.
I still don't know what that means.
Which, by the way, to this day, does not mean how many times you hit them in the head. It means if you killed them with a headshot.
Oh, okay.
So you could hit someone in the head, but they have like 1 health left if you had like a cult, for example, and then you kill them in the body and you didn't get any headshot percentage. And that stat just means nothing, by the way. Like if you ever go and look, sometimes what's funny is there's been tournaments where it was actually really bad players who had the highest headshot percentage because they got so few kills that they had a better chance of having them all be headshots now. It happened before. I think God B had it one time and he's an absolute bot.
Well, this is
legend, but a bot. Nonetheless.
This is an issue that Sideshow brought up in a previous episode, I think, because I remember there was you guys were talking about at Contenders how Grim Reality had a really low pulse bomb kill percentage or whatever it was, and you guys went to the VODs. Like it seems like he might just be a bad player, right, from that raw statistic. But when you went to the VODs, he's focusing all his pulse bombs on D.Va to try and demech her.
Yeah.
So like stuff like that
pretty common.
Yeah, but like stuff like that needs context with it.
Yeah, definitely. And the stuff, I mean, for Genji, it's even less obvious what's going on because actually, well, Dragon Blades as well. Even ignoring that side of it, where you often use a Dragon Blade to bait out like positioning or support ultimates, when you actually get kills, if you get the kill with the dash, it doesn't register as a Dragon Blade kill on Winston's lab. It just registers as a normal dash kill because the icon is different. So it completely messes stuff up because you can have 5k Dragon Blades that he dashed through like Flower of the World Cup, and it just comes up as you got 1 kill there. And so it ruins the statistic completely.
See, this is why you have to be so happy and glad that one thing in esports they have at least done is allowed people who were real community commentators and experts to be the experts in talent. Because I used to be so worried that when esports got to this level, they would bring in some ex-NFL guy, and he'd be like, well, ladies and gentlemen, in that game, only 2 Dragon Blades. You got to really step it up. You need more than that if you're going to win at this level. Like some absolute garbage like that. And you'd just be sat at home like that gif of that guy with that gun. Like, it would be too much, wouldn't it? You'd actually turn off hardcore fans.
Yeah, you definitely would. I'm not even sure whether you detract. I mean, it wouldn't take that much knowledge to be able to tell when someone's completely talking on their ass, is it? It's pretty easy.
Right. Okay. I think it's fair to move on. I mean, we've literally been going for like what, an hour?
What do you mean? You can't see who I'm pointing to. I'm pointing at Bren.
Oh, what? Yeah.
No, forget it.
Well
just move on.
One guy just completely
I'll look through the comment section later and have a look. World Cup storylines is one thing I wanted to talk about, particularly as well about how UK shit the bed when they're performing so well in the group stages. People are expecting big things, but also the USA South Korea game. I guess we'll just start in the order that the games are played then. UK, Sweden. No, you're shaking your head. Have I done something wrong?
No. I'm not saying about you. You mentioned UK, South Korea. Sorry, USA, South Korea.
Right.
No, and my mind is just like flashbacks to people tweeting, this is the most high skill level game I've seen in my life. I'm like,
No,
come on, please.
The issue with that game is that it was incredibly entertaining, but it was really low caliber. Like, team
people
play.
were just conflating the two completely. They're just going to get wrapped up in the hype and going,
this
is the most incredible game I've seen.
I would just love to sit any of the people who said that down, and I would hook them up on one arm to a lie detector and on the other arm to an electrifying rod. And what we'll do is every time they lie, they get electrocuted accordingly. And let's see whether they, in fact, telling the truth, it was the best game ever played, or perhaps they were a little bit hyped.
The thing is, the polygraph can't tell if you really think that that's the case. I think half of the people really deluded themselves into thinking that was the case. I mean, maybe now they would have different
It was
opinions.
my first time in an audience in a stadium with like a USA team being played. And as soon as they started a USA chance, I thought, fucking hell, get me out.
I was fucking sitting next to you chanting USA.
Team as well.
No, it was with the South Korea match in particular, because I was surrounded, and it's deafening. It's like an interview I had. I talked about it like it is, because the players can feel it, even if you don't particularly hear it. It's like almost like a seventh man just playing for you, this crowd that's roaring.
Man alive, that's pretty harsh. So basically, the USA is so shit. They had a seventh man, all their fans giving them power to the spirit bomb. They could feel USA chanting through them. They were thinking of the founding fathers and overtaking everything, thinking about when they went in the Korean War and beat North Korea and the things they did for that, and still lost. That's how shit white people.
Yeah.
That is exactly what Bren implied.
Fair enough.
Exactly.
It's bold, but fair enough. I respect it.
See, all that went through my head was when you said they had a seventh man, and you said you could feel the vibrations through the studio. It's like a seventh man that just lightly massaging the bottom of their feet, and like whatever contact points they have, just lightly vibrating them the entire time. Because you know that it's going on, but most of the time, I think in a game like Overwatch, the hype moments, like the stuff that's actually happened, the fight is kind of over anyway. So I don't feel like it's that momentum. It is a momentum based game, but it's not. I don't feel like it's a super, like when something's happening, it's not like you're able to really drive that forwards as much as a lot of other games, I feel. Because like most of the time they're like massively chanting, you've won the fight that was happening.
Yeah, that's true. But then it's the snowball effect, right? They carry it into the next fight. The chance were they I tell you what, one thing about the Americans, they've got some lung capacity on them. Because, they might not be too intelligent with the chants.
No originality with the chant.
USA. I mean,
I've never heard a different
anything in that rhymes with it. It's mad, isn't it? There's no break. Same verse over and over again.
Repeated letters. Yeah. But, they, God bless them. They were going at it hard as much as it didn't help them in the end at all. But
one of the things I found interesting is I don't think Korea pulled out Mercy at all. Maybe they pulled it up for one map, but I remember I was
Korea were playing full-time Mercy. Toby was basically on Mercy the entire tournament, mate.
I don't think
were you accidentally watching APAC?
I think specifically
Apex.
No, I think specifically for the USA matchup, I don't think they played Mercy very much at all. Whereas for the rest of the games the next day they were playing Mercy.
What you're saying is they lost 6v8 instead of 6v7. That's what you're implying there. Given that got the Mercy res, that's always a player advantage. That's what you just implied.
They did play. They did play a merciless composition a couple of times on Hanamura and stuff like that. But in general, they were running Mercy like pretty much most of the time. I think it was, honestly, the Winston's lab stats haven't been updated, and obviously we don't have other stats, but I think it would be somewhere around like 90% playtime. They were running it for basically the entirety of the control map of Eichenwald. They were certainly running it the entire time.
What I like though about the South Korean team is that lineup was straight fire. Like that's actually what Overwatch would have been like if like Kesper had gotten involved and had proper recruiting and like coaching staff and stuff that was like at the high level that they're at in the esports in Korea. I can't believe that Lunatic High was like winning so much when they had that fucking DPS comp. It's atrocious. So this lineup was sick. Like it didn't matter they weren't a real team. This is amazing.
This is actually a lot like Team Soul, I think, because you basically have two upgraded DPS. I mean, not compared to Flower and Sabiolbi, but like two upgraded DPS over the old Lunatic High team. And then I guess Mono and Miro, kind of hard to say. Mono's probably the better tank in this metagame because Miro's been exploited a bit more recently. But like Team Soul looks actually really good if they can play like what they were doing in the Soul Cup and like what half the team was doing here.
Yeah, I think Lunatic High was really the exception as well. They're like the only team that's been able to win with really poopy DPS because they had a specific style that really went around it, right? And then in the previous season when they won, they had Who Are You playing phenomenal Genji. So, you know, it was only that one season, and they were playing like a ton of the Sombra kind of bait anti-dive compositions that worked well for them.
You know what's weird?
But yeah, it is.
Well, because of them, people start saying that DPS aren't as important as supports and tanks in Overwatch. That's definitely not true. I think
that's just circle jerking, mate. Like, it's actually a classic thing in all games. It's like, you know, that current meme that people do nowadays where they're like, someone else says something and then they go, me, an intellectual, and then you put like some comment. That's what people do in every game, right? What they do is, because obviously the most pleb level fan just likes the people who kill everyone and do all the obviously high skilled things. People who think that, like, oh, well, I'm a bit more of the thinkers. They're always like, I think actually the support the more important characters in the game. But maybe that didn't sleep off the screen to you immediately. You have to kind of have a nose for these, like, fucking hell, mate. All right, maybe it's both. Maybe they're both pretty important, right?
Yeah.
It does depend on the meta game as well,
Yeah,
though,
definitely.
I think, because we back when they were like Apex Season 1 and before that as well.
Diva.
It was it was like, it's always different roles that are really important. But the way that Lunatic High were playing, and both of those seasons actually, because you're playing the dive meta, honestly, if you do have the best tanks and the best supports, you're probably going to win, because it's like the way that particular meta is set up, unless you've got some mental DPS players that are just ripping the game apart, but nobody really has those at the moment, that are able to properly rip apart like Jaehong and Toby. So when you've got supports and tanks that are that level, sure, but I don't, you know, the problem is equating it all the way down to NA level.
Well, it never makes sense, does it, to use like the best team as a standard for like how people should or could play, you know? Like, there will always be an exception to a degree because they're like a great team.
Yeah. But I think in terms of the South Korea's performance in the World Cup, although it is kind of a super team that they've formed, like you were saying, they still looked pretty sloppy. They didn't have they looked like they were still adjusting to the meta a little bit. They had some great teamwork, actually, that looked like it was going pretty well. And Flower had some insane moments. I'll tell you what, I backpedaled on Flower as well. Because because for the longest time, people, I think, were overrating him for his IEM Kangi performance, and like loved the narrative that he was a superstar kid that they plugged into the team, and just that one piece was missing, and that launched him to the finals. But then when you watch him in the next 2 seasons of Apex, he looked like he dropped off a little bit. It was actually Sabiobi that was coming in
Especially
super strong with like these big performances. But I think that might have also been because that was the time where his finger injury was the highest. I actually dislike thinking too much about how like wrist and hand injuries and stuff, because I feel like even in the player's mind, if they're playing really well, they'll like go, oh yeah, it's letting up, you know, that this is where I'm feeling my best. And then when it's bad, they'll just blame the injury as well. So I don't really know exactly what's going through Flower's hand or his head, but it does seem like if that's been an increase in how he feels about his hand or his wrist or whatever, it does seem to be an improvement.
He did play with a bandaged hand all weekend, by the way.
Yeah.
That's probably just playing into some animation. He was waiting in case they lost him up. Then he'd be like, "Oh my god, he's unraveling it!" And he just got out mental on him.
I mean, at the same time, you have to take into account the competition they played, right? Because Team USA might legitimately be one of the best teams you could make out of NA talent, right? And then you have France, Rogue, obviously. Canada.
Okay, you want to start hurting people's feelings, Harsha? You want to start that segment of the show?
All right, let's go.
So speaking of storylines, way overhyped. So apparently that Jake guy is just like the best DPS player in the world now. He's fucking amazing, isn't he? Because of one game. Sound. Yeah. Forget all the rest of his career and everyone else's careers and Apex and all the other LAN tournaments. He's just the shit.
And Sinatra is now terrible as well. It's like the two things went so
weird, isn't
massively
it?
separate.
It's so convenient.
I don't know. I commented on this earlier and got a lot of hate if you saw.
No, bring it out.
Yeah,
bring it out. I like don't worry about it. Back you up.
Harsha, you have to understand, when an idiot who doesn't know anything and is objectively wrong tells you he hates your opinion, he's actually complimenting you. You're right.
But essentially,
you should want them to hate you.
This is like a strategy that's been around Apex for I mean, not years. The game's been out for a year and a half, but for like a really long time, where you put Harmony. Okay, this is just gonna get into the Harmony Orb shit, but where you put a Harmony Orb on a Tracer and you send them to 1v1 the other Tracer, and like Sinatra obviously wasn't accustomed to that, didn't play well into it, and if you watch the clips, he's like just getting hounded by Sabiobi. He's trying to kill the tanks, whereas Sabiobi is just hunting him down, and then while this was all happening, USA was able to like heal or put out stuff into their own team, while Sinatra's kind of playing on his own. And Jake obviously was one of the recipients of this, so he played really, really well. And it looked like it was a duel between him and Flower the entire series. Obviously, Sabilby played really well as well, but like I feel like you have to kind of take into account that there's a reason that a player that's considered to be really good is doing really poorly, whereas another player that might not have been on everyone's radar is doing really well.
Called resources, right?
Yeah.
Creating space. These are concepts that exist as intangibles, unfortunately. You can't measure them or exactly not. I mean, you can to a degree with the Harmony Orb, like you're saying, but for example, creating space is a concept in every team game that is so difficult to understand because you have to know why they're doing that. And sometimes it looks like you're not doing anything. For example, you might be the bait in that setup that's making the other guy have room to operate.
I think you're muted, Sideshow.
You're muted, lad. Sort it out.
Funny.
He's so confused.
He's creating space for us, see, by not talking. We get a chance to talk.
No, still can't hear
get
you.
to look at his ridiculous funhouse space.
Thank you, Josh, for joining us. I'll kick you from the call. That was his time.
He's
gone now.
This is like a routine
and
feature now.
What, just kicking off with this guy called just fucking it up
Do we keep going now, by the way?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you can hear me.
Yeah, we'll keep going. Is it working?
Oh, wow, it's actually gone down.
Yeah, you're
still not working, lad. We'll just edit this.
Here's the other thing, though, right? Because on the other side of the equation, as you mentioned, it was the Sinatra hate train that started going, right? I don't know how many games I've now seen this stereotype come up where, okay, so when you see in a Hollywood movie, there's a character, right? And his family's got money, and he's really good looking and all the girls like him and he does pretty well in school and he's on the football team, right? What are you supposed to feel towards that character? What would your guess be? What would you feel? Probably supposed to hate him, right? It's probably going to be the douchebag villain that the good guy's going to overcome, right? So because everyone watching and commenting is dog shit at Overwatch in comparison to any of these players, they hate people like that. So if someone's 16 and fucking killing the game, they're going to have to be haters. So that's why if someone's really young but still good even at a young age, they don't choke on land, because that's normally the first point of how you critique them. And then they're also sick at the game but at a young age. There's only one avenue you can go down. He must be toxic as fuck, mustn't he? We all hate those toxic players. So they always do it. It's with every player, mate. It's every game I've been in, there's a player like that who just they live under a microscope their whole life. Anything they do is just blown so out of proportion.
I want to be clear about
actually
test.
I hate that stuff. It's working now. Don't you worry, lad. You can finally input. But I hate that shit from the wider gaming community when they are literally they'll be singing his praises all day long for a good few months, and then suddenly it's I watched his stream and he's not a happy chappy in ranked.
No. You know what's funny is last week it was all let's get Harsha into BlizzCon, and this week it's Harsha's a shit journalist because of the Harmony Orb.
All right, pal. Don't take it personal.
Why not both?
I mean, I guess both.
They're not mutually exclusive. To be fair.
They let shit journalists in as well.
True.
True. ESPN was there.
No, but just one thing to add. I mean, I know that Harmony Orb wasn't on Sabilby the entire series, but if you just watch the games, which I went back and did, essentially what happens is Sinatra's focus isn't on winning a 1v1. It's on killing the tanks, and that's kind of USA's focus or playstyle in general, I would say. And I think it's kind of unfair to say that because Sabilby was winning all these 1v1s, which weren't really 1v1s, that I don't know, Sinatra's just terrible and bad at Tracer.
Wait, because I think that you kind of can say that Sinatra was misplaying it.
I think
if you're consistently getting dominated like that, you have to start taking the 1v1 and either ask for a Discord from the Zen or your own Harmony Orb, depending on where it was previously supposed to be allocated.
Yeah, I don't,
because you can't just keep feeding yourself in and trying to make space and hope that Jake carries the game.
You 100% should have tried something else at least, because what he was doing wasn't working. But I don't think it's fair.
But this is kind of a similar situation to Logic's at the Contenders playoffs as well, because people were wondering why he dropped off so much. It's because teams were putting a Discord orb on him, and they're keeping their Tracer close to the support so that they can put a Harmony orb on him and take that 1v1. You're closer to the supports. You've got the line of sight with the orbs and stuff. You can take healing. You can take a bit of poke from the Lucio or Zen or something as well. So I think you have to be able to adapt to it. But you can certainly say why this was a problem for him. You can't just be shut up about Harmony Orb. That's such an excuse.
He is a 16-year-old kid, though, to be fair, playing in a tournament that isn't his team and in a setting where you're in a mixed team. So if you add all these things together, I can give him a little more leeway, you know? I mean, what the fuck do anyone in this group do when they were 16? What, you're all making the right decisions. I once gave a girl a copy of the complete works of Oscar Wilde as a birthday gift, thinking I was going to get laid. Guess what? No one in fucking history's got laid off that. Oscar Wilde himself could give her the first edition. He's not getting shit. I mean, he was gay anyway, so I guess it's irrelevant. And dead, but that's beside the point. The point is, we all make mistakes. What we think are smart moves is sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, that's
Is that a real story, by the way?
For real. I don't tell any lies, mate. Listen, it's long enough ago now. You have to realize it's like about 18 years ago now, so no problem for me. It's a different life.
Sure.
A decade ago, over a decade ago. Right. Let's go into the Harsha media pass problem. I mean, it's not really a problem because you did end up getting in, admittedly, an hour after the show actually started. But the fact,
when the actual director of Overwatch has to give you personally the letter because no one else in the entire company would even spit on you if you were on fire, is that not a problem? Not a loaded question.
I mean, I'll be honest. I honestly still don't know what happened. Even though a lot of people tried to explain it to me, I'm just gonna write it up as a mistake. But
you should have just pulled the race card. You should just literally, if you'd gone that route, they'd have instantly given in and given you. It should just be like fucking white supremacy at Blizzard. Look at the way they keep me down, trying to tell me my site is just a fan site.
I don't think they're.
Well, I'm not a fan, sir. I am a working professional, and I have worked. And then you start crying. And my mother had to do 3 jobs to get just lie. Essentially, if you just lie, you win. Yeah.
I don't think they're very happy that I tweeted about it.
Did they like the part where I kept blowing it up and completely ripping them new assholes all the time?
I don't think they like that either.
No, I don't think they did. I don't think they did. You know?
Well, this was just a little thing in our Discord, right? And then I tweeted about it with a little caveat as well, which I'm still going to put the caveat in, which was that I don't know what kind of people are normally allowed in BlizzCon in terms of like the coverage sites, because over.gg is small and it only serves one of the games that is going on at BlizzCon. Yes, it's a major tournament that's happening there, but it is only one of the games. So, and also I don't know that many other Overwatch sites that actually got coverage. So is it actually reasonable that we would have that over.gg would have got the coverage there?
There were smaller sites that got in.
Who else was there? Oh,
like
really?
eSports Heaven. I don't know how much smaller, but I would presume they're a bit. I don't know. They don't get a lot of the same traffic, I would assume. But they were able to get passes. I know that Winston's Lab doesn't. I mean, okay, to be fair to them,
Winston's Lab had 3 guys there, but they weren't on media passes, right?
Oh, really? I know they got, I think, at least one. But to be fair to them, they did help with like Contenders and stuff like that. But I don't like from what I was.
What does that even mean? So if someone gives me a Turkish delight and then kicks me in the dick, I don't go, well, I did get Turkish delight, so fair play, have at it. I go, why kick me in the dick? And they go, what? Forgetting about the Turkish delight? I go, no, my dick hurts. Stop kicking it. I think that's argue with that analogy. There you go.
What's the Turkish delight and what's the kick in the dick for this?
Getting to do Contenders.
Oh, right, no. They helped out with Contenders.
I didn't think Harsha's Turkish in case that's what you thought the implication was. There we go. Not that ridiculous.
No, I didn't think that was the implication. But
at the same time,
I wonder where you're going.
Well, at the same time, it wasn't really possible to do the same kind of work that we did at Contenders, just because the players were really, I guess, they were limited in what they could do in terms of interviews and stuff like that. They had to stay in kind of a room the entire day. But
do you only do interviews in fields? What are you talking about?
Well, no, I mean,
what does that mean?
No. So I think that
Farmer Harsha with his video camera.
I know.
I think that the players after their matches were kind of herded, keeping with the farming fucking metaphor,
into a barn,
into like a private players room, and they weren't really allowed out. To be fair, but you could still do stuff like, I guess after the fact, like at hotels and stuff like that. One of the issues though is that it was so late that I wasn't able to get a camera or like anything to actually do content. So I just have like written interviews that are coming out later. But like I definitely would have liked to do at least what we did at Contenders.
Surely the bigger issue though is like Blizzard talks a good game that they care about the esports side and the competitive side, but this is clearly a gaping abject failure in that respect. Like You can say as much as you want. Well, there wasn't really much opportunities to do content the same way. And, not many of the sites that were competitive sites had things. Yeah, it is an esports tournament. Like, why would they, like, if they are valuing like a newspaper in the local area having a media pass over one of the biggest competitive coverage sites, there's something wrong there, because that suggests someone doesn't get the idea. Like this, when people were arguing, there's not much space. Well, I can tell you who will start by cutting. The guy who's just from a fucking newspaper and knows nothing about the game. What are you talking about? Do you even know what distribution rates are? If he gets 30,000 views on his newspaper, they can get more than that on their website. What are you talking about? It's people around the world, not just people who read it and go, that's interesting. Don't care about any of this. Billy, you play Mario, right? That is the most worthless coverage possible. Meanwhile, what the problem with this is, it all just fuels the same problem that's been in Overwatch the whole time. Like the fact that people are just cool with the fact that the competitive Overwatch subreddit has to exist and be this limited little corner of perverts who, like, it's the equivalent of people who are into foot fetishes or something. They're not allowed out in society in the mainstream, are they? They have to be kept in one little corner.
I think
they're MGR links.
Wow.
For the reason though that I think that this is just going to be isolated to the World Cup is that Contenders didn't have this problem. It's the same venue for the Overwatch League, and the system there was far better from the sound of what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that the commissioner the commissioner of the Overwatch League still took a while to get a pass to you makes me think that there's some kind of system where you have to, go through mad back BlizzCon channels to actually get the pass, rather than it actually being the Overwatch team who are then going to be doing all the rest of the Overwatch stuff.
To be fair, there's probably 78,000 media websites trying to apply though for Overwatch.
Yeah.
Was it 75,000?
Very popular.
Very
75,000, whatever.
Every pro has an Overwatch website.
Of course, yeah.
But I don't think this will be a recurring theme. But I think it does feed into a wider concern that people had when your BlizzCon pass got rejected, which was this fear, prediction, prophecy that Blizzard are just going to try and do all of that kind of content themselves and just try and lock out, literally fan sites. Because, I mean, realistically, it is pretty much a fan site. It's been created just for Overwatch. We're covering all the news. We're putting out everything, but we are locked into one game. Our coverage doesn't go much further, and it's not the most professional stuff in the world. So yeah, it's the best that Overwatch currently has, but I can definitely see a world in which Blizzard tries to replicate that in them, for themselves.
To be fair, I don't think that they're going to try and be the only. I think it'd be very silly to be the only person covering Overwatch, because that's limiting who can see the game, right? Or who can see kinds of content when you only have one site doing everything, right? And I kind of understand why that concern might come to place, because they're taking all the clicks, they're taking all the revenue or whatever it is. But at the same time, I'm sure that they're not going to try and be the only site covering Overwatch. I'm sure they want other kinds of media to be present, I guess. But it is.
Well, here's the thing, though. All they have to do, they don't even have to try and be the only place. They don't even have to shut anybody down. They don't have to give lockdown media passes for everybody. Because if they're providing a match ticker that works, a place to comment on stuff that happens, news of all of the roster changes and stuff, and stats for themselves as well, they've basically covered the 4 different niches that most of the fan sites in Overwatch actually do themselves. And that would be a reasonable expectation for a thoroughly well built out Overwatch.
Yeah, but that's where, unfortunately, that's where the subreddit issue fucks you, basically. Because here's the thing, when League of Legends was getting big as a game, that is a game where the front pages had esports stuff on it, and a pretty decent balance, actually. So the key thing is you can be a complete nobody that isn't even working for a site right now. And in theory, if your piece just caught fire, it could go to the top of Reddit and it could beat out anything on LoL Esports, which is their own esports website for League of Legends, right? And this is something where I think people are just a bit too neat when they try and resolve this problem. Blizzard could just do it all themselves. There's no just involved in it. You've got to put together the whole editorial team. And then if they're under Blizzard, probably won't want to be very critical of people and they won't want to write certain things. So immediately they're always going to leave room for someone to do their job better. Because I actually had this happen to me myself, where in League of Legends, when they first started LCS, because Riot was very controlling, people used to just say, I better watch out. If you ever get on the bad side of Riot, they'll just lock you out of the whole scene. And that never happened. Because what happened is eventually they realized It's the other way around. I'm going to cover the game no matter what. I'm going to do all my stuff no matter what. Admittedly, I have a subreddit where I can get a lot of traction for the stuff like that, you know, so they can't control that. So as a result, it's the other way around. I have the leverage. They need to work with me if they want me to be nicer to them or do things that are more within their wheelhouse as well. And the same thing happened, like famously in League of Legends. I had a blacklist from TSM, who was the #1 Western team in terms of fans. And people used to say, even journalists said the same thing. Yeah, but that's the thing. Why would they ever need you? You know, they could just get their own journalists to do interviews for their own website. I mean, I'm waiting for that to happen. Never happened. And in the end, the other thing happened. Old Reginald had to come, bow the knee, scrape, you know, swear allegiance as my bannerman. And then I accepted his fealty. Good friend of mine. Not really.
Yeah, that's how it went down. with a lot of back and forths in between.
There's a lot of pomp involved in it. Yeah, a lot of ceremony.
For the fact, though, that they are smaller sites in Overwatch and the large players actually don't have so it's a weird space, the Overwatch scene, because a lot of the small niche sites have the more dedicated or people who actually know what they're talking about,
yeah, makes
writers
sense.
and stuff, and the larger sites like the Score, I don't even know whether the Score still cover Overwatch actually, but they used to cover
I'm
it.
sure they do
have
very
articles come
lightly
out all the time. Yeah. eSports do it as well, but again, that's very light coverage. They have I think they have one feature writer, which is Albion, and then
for esports
he's the yeah, and the others just cover like the wider game.
They're just news posters, the others, I think.
I think Nicole occasionally does feature pieces because she did a piece. She
like
visited Apex, but it was a piece about female gaming.
Well, might have had a tweet about that once. Go check the timeline.
Yeah, and a video. That was a good video as well. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, so if it gets to a system where the, say, OverwatchLeague.com or whatever, because they've just started putting out content, and I think they're still trying to hire other writers and stuff. Yeah. If they actually start putting out content that puts the squeeze on fan sites as well, I can see a world in which they stop being able to function as well. I mean, guys like Winston's Lab, if there's an API that's public, they'll be perfectly fine because they can put that up all the time. Yes. If there's no API made public, they have little access to things and have to run off a less efficient system.
Stats is very different to content, though. Like, it will always be possible, unless Blizzard literally like somehow got Reddit to like ban you from being allowed to have posts. They can't stop good content coming from other places. So you can always beat them out in terms of having better content.
The issue is that it would, I think, like make a lot of types of content obsolete. So for instance, like news, that one would be gone like out the door already. You'd have to be essentially.
I mean,
would it entirely
you would still do it because you would still like cover all of the news from Apex.
Right, but wouldn't more people be
cover,
checking
like,
Overwatch League.com rather than over.gg?
Okay, but won't there be news that they can't put?
Yeah, sure. So like reporting.
So that's actually the big problem. Anything that's dedicated to a game developer, unless you got some really cool developer, like one day there might be a game dev that's the equivalent of like the UFC, where like the UFC commissioner president guy just talks mad shit himself, and he so by doing that, that's actually very clever because he knows his audience base and he knows that they want that, and so he does it himself, and it doesn't feel too like stuffed shirt effect, But I do think that since most game devs go the opposite route and they want everything to seem lovely from the outside, especially in Overwatch, I think Blizzard's going to be going super hard at that because they don't want any of the owner type people to get wind of any sort of like minor scandals behind the scenes or misappropriate, like inappropriate behavior of people. So these things will always be in the domain of the independent people, I think.
Yeah, and breaking the news before it actually gets published as well will be completely up to external sites. The other thing, though, is that a lot of the way, just speaking from over.gg, the way that generates a lot of the traffic is that people come for the match ticker and for the actual well-organized match ticker that's run. So a lot of the traffic comes from there. Then they see the articles and the news that's written, and then because the comments feature and the way that you can log in and make an account is very quick and intuitive, the return on users is very high, and the amount of comments per article is extremely high, more than I've seen on basically any comparable like news kind of site. So it fosters some kind of community. So the fact that they got started early is good, The fact that over.gg's already got a bit of a name for itself and building a bit of a community feel is fine. But if these sites are not built as like solely one thing, and so I feel like if you take away parts of them, they're still gonna feel a fairly large decrease in traffic from like the match ticker itself being not as good as the one on OverwatchLeague.com, for example. I can see a world in which it affects the journalism ecosystem within Overwatch quite significantly.
So the one,
No, I very much doubt that the Overwatch League website is going to be covering the lower tier tournaments in Overwatch. That's going to be something that over.gg has a niche in, so you don't need to really worry about that.
Yeah, and I mean, sites like Liquipedia as well, it's just it's where all of the information comes into one place, right? So they don't really have to worry about people doing it all over the place.
And even something like Apex, I would just say, from knowing history of games, when they have their own website, I bet that gets barely any coverage. Yeah. But it's obviously the premier, it's still one of the premier tournaments. Yeah. In fact, it arguably might end up being the premier tournament.
Yeah.
For the real 90s.
For the people who care about... well, possibly
good games,
better competition. It might be better. It's
we did. Take,
I mean, it's got more Koreans.
It's all up in the air.
We did take.
It's probably
every. I mean, like all the top Korean teams except for Runaway. So the issue. I mean,
here's a question for you.
The issue is
here's an issue: is you put these Korean players, these top Korean players, in America, where the competition's not as good and the practice isn't as good, and also they're out of their comfort zone because it's been a recurring problem as well in other scenes. Where Koreans, they don't like the big culture difference, the big culture change, and suddenly they start performing a lot worse than they did in the past. And then Apex does. Eventually, these teams, who were challenger players in the past, have now overtaken them, and now they're the kings of their own region because obviously the Koreans they take that stuff much more seriously.
Oh, I think there's a couple of points as to why I think that'll be slightly less bad than it has been in other games for Overwatch. The first is that the actual level of competition should still be pretty good because you have 3 full Korean rosters. You have Dallas Fuel, who are kind of on that level, or have been previously, and now somewhere around there. And then you've got some of the teams which are possibly decent. So, I mean, the difference in skill at the moment between the two scenes is not going to be hugely different. The ecosystem in terms of ranked and stuff definitely is. So we'll see if that has an effect.
Put it this way.
The second thing, though, just the second thing about moving Koreans over. Isn't that mostly when you try and plant them into Western teams? Because at the moment, what Overwatch League teams are doing, for example, there was a recent interview with the guys from Team Seoul, who are backed by the KSV guys. They're moving over massive amounts of they've got a Korean chef that's moving over with them as well, just serving out Korean food for them. They seem like they're really putting a big emphasis because they have all this massive backing behind them of almost literally picking up the stuff around them, planting them down they're taking a plant, but with all the soil that's around the roots as well, and dumping it just in a larger pot that happens to be in a bigger garden. It seems like it'll be an easier change, I think, for a lot of the Koreans.
Well, I think there are 2 issues with that. Not with the Korean adapting thing, but with what we were saying earlier, where Korea might be the best environment to play in. I think there are going to be a lot of culture shifts in the U.S. when all these teams move over because, for one, NA has typically been split between already East and West, right? So you have pros that are really spread thin on the ladder, the competitive ladder, whereas now all Overwatch League pros are going to be in West Coast, right? So ranked should at least be better in that sense. And then you have the case where we have a LAN practice environment, and I think teams have to take this significantly more seriously now that they're in the big league, so to speak, right? So I think that you would solve a lot of issues that would otherwise be present in an American league, I would say.
Here's the thing, though. I would say that I agree with some of the effect won't be as bad. For example, if you are Seoul Dynasty and you have a whole Korean team and a whole staff and you bring over all these elements to kind of offset it. But the ones that you should really worry about is not just in terms of playing level, but people who are Korean, who are the 1 or the 2 Korean on a Western team. Because the trend generally with that is it's not that the others all see, oh, this is what a Korean's like and aspire to their level. They go down to the level of the other people. For example, they start the first thing obviously everyone does with the Koreans is just teach them all the swear words and then say, haha, we are having fun in solo queue. And then basically it's like when you have that kid at your school, who's been homeschooled or he's super religious. And then he comes around your house and, you give him some fucking Sunny D and a sugar fountain off his tits, isn't he? He's just going ham. He's going, come on, you cunts, let's have it. That's what happens with the Koreans if they just, wanting to take it.
It hasn't happened yet with the guys that have come over. Effect, I feel, is almost an exception in the sense that the guy seems to be so determined to be the best in any field that I can never really see that happening. And also the environment that he's in is, I think Dallas Fuel are quite an odd Western team. They're weird in that they have a very special team atmosphere that's very upbeat and also they're like the best team and pretty hardworking as well. Now, where I thought it might happen is with the FaZe guys and Carpe, but Carpe doesn't actually seem to be exhibiting that yet. And how long has he been over? Like 3 months or something? I can definitely see it happening with like the Philadelphia guys. Who else have brought in like some? Oh, the Boston Upright. They're just gonna want to end their life by the end of the season. Honestly. They won't even go down to the level of the North Americans. They'll just be
especially you have to remember, like the other thing about Korean teams is this is another aspect that's actually very nuanced that even people in League of Legends don't understand. Is one of the reasons why when you're in a Korean team, you don't behave in a manner which I hate the label, but people say toxic because the idea is you're a corrosive element. You know that what you do has a knock-on effect onto the other guys. Part of the reason why that doesn't happen in traditionally Korean teams is because your coach does all of that for you. He critiques people to such a level that you don't need to. He takes care of all that. The problem is when they're in these sorts of teams, like the Boston one's the perfect example. If some of these players start playing like shit or they don't practice properly or they don't improve in a certain area, I could see Korean players getting mega triggered by that.
Yeah, I think some of them have tried to avoid that by hiring Korean coaches. I mean, actually, Houston doesn't even have any Korean players, and I thought that was incredibly strange that they picked up a Korean coach with no Korean players. I don't know who's acting as their translator as well. Maybe
Tyrong speaks English.
They must have a translator. Tyrong speaks English, but if you've ever had a conversation with him, that dude is fucking hilarious. He comes from TF2, so I used to get all like the inside gossip from Freak of Freaks Blue the whole time. He used to try and tell me things, but even when I was trying to write up news posts and get like the breaking news of what was happening at Freak of Freaks, it would just be both an incredible effort to try and understand him, but also a great use of my time because it was so entertaining. But it's not to the point where you'd be able to coach a team and have what the concepts that you're trying to convey be effectively put into action by the players. But anyway, that's away from the point. What I was saying was named Hui has come in for the Philadelphia roster, and he's working with some of the Koreans there, including Carpe. So I can imagine him having a positive effect there because he's been the guy working with Carpe, and as I say, he hasn't really demonstrated any of that. But yeah, for like I think it's definitely something that you got to watch out for. Like if you pair a Korean guy without a Korean coach, how well does that work?
Not very well.
The LA Valley guys as well have got some
full Korean staff almost.
Yeah, but they also had some issues with the Korean players dropping off in terms of, I don't know. I mean, the entire team structure there was weird, right? Because they changed up their calling style and had it
put it on a tracer, which makes no sense.
Allegedly grim reality. Yeah, when they've got 2 Koreans in the team, both of the Koreans started dropping off in terms of their performances. But was that just because they were in a bad system, or were they playing worse? It's difficult to tell without going back and studying their individual gameplay the whole time. But we'll see when they play in the Overwatch League.
Okay, so that leads us on pretty nicely onto the fact this question now, whereas so you've noticed a couple of teams in the Overwatch League, they've gone towards the more of an approach of buying a more marketable team, right? So American players, Western players, a team that's actually got a bit of a fan base behind them. And then there's teams like the London Spitfire, where they've just gone, you know what, we want to win season 1. Let's go for 12 Koreans. Let's hit it off nicely straight off the bat. What's your guys' opinion then in terms of what's the most effective here? Because I feel like I actually like, C9 Jack's approach in this, where he's gone I want to win season 1, gain a bit of a fan base off the back of that, because these are new endemic brands that they're creating.
$1 billion.
The issue here is that wasn't his original approach. His original approach was that he was trying to build a relatively Western team with some Koreans thrown in, but because of like buyouts and like teams were
he learned from his mistake. Congrats.
Well, I mean, teams were essentially being really shady with their buyouts, and so what happens is
imagine that, eh?
What happens is he buys 2 Korean teams, like 2 of the best Korean teams in the world.
Why not?
I mean,
wait, I can't really believe though that was just a purely financial thing, because he must have either wanted to buy a super cheap but still very good and loyal to the fan base kind of team and decided to avoid it when the buyouts were too bad. But there's no the entire stuff with the buyouts has been that the Korean players and the Korean teams have really large buyouts because the Apex organizations know that they're sat on a fucking gold mine. So they've been selling them for large amounts. Like the Seoul team had a large one. The luxury watch guys had a large buyout as well. So I can't really see a world in which 2 Korean organizations and all of the buyouts associated with those was cheaper than creating a Western team.
Surely, logically, it's worth the buyout as well, because it's more of a guaranteed return on investment, isn't it? Whereas if you do a large buyout for a random group of Western players, no one even knows how they'll fit together.
Put it this way, I've also heard that a lot of them were just not taking like a long time to respond. I think Jack was just getting irritated with that. And while he was in Korea, you might as well just if you're talking to them already, they're one of the best teams in the world. I don't know. It makes sense, I guess.
Well, I would have. It would have been a hilarious situation had he had he decided to spend more money and sign Sinatra for whatever larger contract, like 170k. You have Sinatra sat on the roster, and then you realize that you can't really build a team around him, or don't want to build a team around him. Just sign 11 Koreans instead, and just permanently bench Sinatra for the season. That would have been hilarious.
Reddit would tell you that it'd be a better team because they wouldn't be able to understand this toxicity, and therefore they wouldn't get the best.
Very true. Very true.
And they already know to put the harmony orb on the trace, so problem solved.
There you go. Done.
Very easy.
I had a point, and it's gone already.
You were talking about what the approach of whether you take marketing Western players or whether you do.
I mean, thank you. I can tell you've been at this hosting thing for quite some time.
Done it a little bit,
yeah. I just wing it every time, and then hopefully people don't realize that I'm a moron. But I think slowly they get into grips with it quite quickly. Yeah. My approach, I've already said what I prefer is the whole buying the Korean teams. But I remember as well in one of the episodes we did of here, I said C9 Jack, he's in Korea. Could he be looking for this Korean roster? And you, Sideshow, you were like, oh no, they've been trying out all these players and contenders. This is exactly what you said. We can go back. Right. I've got you on quote. Literally, it's all
sure.
It's all there. And you're like,
the fact that I told you existing information as a possible counterpoint and didn't predict the 180 flip to buy 2 top Korean rosters makes me.
But here we are. Here we have it. 100% prediction rate from Bren and Hook. I mean, what more could you ask for? But for real though, it seems in my mind that's the play. You can build a team around sort of getting that fan base behind them. You know, I'm using the Houston Outlaws as an example because they picked up most of FNRG FE, which are a fan favorites for Contenders. So you get that sort of, the fan base behind them. Also the Optic brand as well. All those plebeians, as Thorin would say, going to be coming over to that, supporting that team. It's too late. I've already gone past it. But I honestly feel like, when Houston Outlaws, I feel like they're probably the strongest mid-tier team in OWL, but they're still getting a win is going to earn you so much many more fans, given the fact that they've gone with this new branding.
Yes, they are the definition of a marketable team in OWL for me. That is where he's pushed it the most. I think Flames has done an excellent job, actually, of being able to pair, having a team that will do somewhat reasonably and could have some upset potential, actually, if they really manage to mesh the system together with... It's pretty much an entirely North American team with a couple of, popular other European players in it. And then they've partnered it with Optic, who have the most rabid fan base in the world. So they've got a really good system there. Having said that, does that actually translate to anything?
Plus, he's already got 3 other DPS players for when you have to inevitably kick Mendo.
And
just learn from history.
Multiple other DPS players.
Just learn from history, hasn't he? Well played.
But the strategy only works if you can actually market them. If you've actually got a ton of fans.
That's where my whole thing falls down. Everyone knows I'm not a proponent of the concept of geolocation. If it worked in esports, it would be nothing like on every level how it's worked in traditional sports. That originally comes from you are all from that town. The players were from that. That whether that's the current case, it's obviously not anymore in traditional sports. The premise for how that's built into the culture, it comes from that. So we're starting from the other end. We're starting from a global scene and trying to pare it down into locations. No one's yet done that in any sport I'm aware of. Then you've got to add in that this notion that people are going to be fans of a guy just because he's American. Did anyone hear that discussion we had earlier about when Sinatra, who should be, by the way, hands down one of the fan favorites of all the American players. You think how young he is, how good he is, he's the future of NA, probably going to be a very good player. He was getting mad hated on because he lost the game. People like winners. I don't know where this idea comes from that. They're just going to go, oh, well, yeah, that Jake guy is on Houston Outlaws. And, I liked Optic and their team's 5th best. So I guess I'm going to buy his jersey. I don't know about that. When it's just players and we're just having competition, I feel like the best strategy from day one is just have the best team.
But the counterpoint to that is literally looking at the numbers of fans of teams at the moment, and there's probably a correlation, but there's massive outliers for certain teams in terms of these are fans of of the organization, of a certain player
we
that
have,
they like
we have
the
no
style
control
of
group
and stuff like that.
Like, it's not like Lunatic High played MLG Vegas, and therefore you're testing their number of fans against people who like FaZe, for example.
No, I mean in other esports. It applies there as well.
No, but there's no control group
the best
there.
teams in the world.
Okay. Like, so when did SK Telecom play in NALCS? I guarantee they'd be way more popular than like the fourth best American team if they played in NALCS.
Sure, but within a region as well, you can say teams within a region, you have teams that have very rabid fan bases because they've been able to push like certain players.
Okay, but there's assumptions there though, right? Because here's the problem: most teams are either this. They either were like a great team in the past and therefore still have a lot of fans. That exists in every sport, they like legacy fans, or they're winners, they're very good, and you have all the glory supporters jump on board, or perhaps some players have an element of like marketability, etc. What I don't understand is people have like conflated it all. So like the idea is just because you're American, you're gonna have all these fans. Don't know about that, mate. I mean, they don't support people just because they're from America. You have to also be entertaining, good at the game to a degree, probably like articulate, do interviews, maybe trash talk. There's actually like a skill set that once you narrow it down, there's not that many Westerners actually have that, Like, for example, you think everyone from Sweden is going to support every Swedish player. Some of them are boring as watching like fucking paint dry, aren't they? No, you're not going to support that guy. You might watch Tavik because he's fucking amazing at the game, Like, I feel like people have gone too ham on that. And then you've got to add in, when you said that there are teams already that are more popular. Yeah, I agree. Optic is way more popular than Lunatic High. Problem is, Optic aren't playing in the Overwatch League. Lunatic High aren't playing the Overwatch League. You're resetting everything. And in theory, I'm sure some fans will go over. It's not the same, though. Like, they could wear their Optic jersey with a COD team, from the COD team and support the CSGO team. And it's probably quite an easy transition mentally. I don't know that you'll get this direct one-to-one crossover from all these new brands. I feel like that will actually sort of water it down a bit. And that's why I think the best strategy is just from day one, try and have the best team, then work outwards, like pick someone, maybe it's Profit or something, start to get him warmed up doing interviews, you explain using your Korean translators what makes them really good. I think you can build it out like that. I think it's easier to build marketability than it is to build a really good fucking team if you've gone the marketability route first,
Especially when you sign rosters that are so long as well. Like some of the organizations or some of the GMs for the organizations was saying, I think this was Flame actually, that the minimum was a 2-year contract or something.
Now that's outrageous.
Now
it's like
now I assume that's a 1+1. But that means that the organization can decide, right, just to carry on with the player, and so they could just decide to carry on with the.
I think the player gets to decide in this case.
I highly doubt it.
That wouldn't make any sense.
Isn't that how an option normally works?
No. It's always the employer that gets to, or the guy who's in charge gets to decide whether they carry on with you. Otherwise, they could hate you, and you'd be like, but tagging along for another year. Just pulling in the salary.
Another 50K,
I'm
please.
Absolutely blowing dick, but I'm going to continue.
The bench warmer.
But where was I going with that? Just knock myself off. Oh, but when you've got such a long contract to work with, the idea that you're going to be able to suddenly create a much better team out of a core that you've originally signed, that 2 years down the road you think is still going to be relevant, is a pretty difficult one. Like,
it's a big gamble, right?
Yeah, and so that means that the teams that have signed shit teams have got to go so hard on the marketing kind of route and really push being able to monetize something to esports fans when they're not even that big fans of them which is crazy.
That's the question I have. Okay, that's the part I don't get. People make out, right, like the marketing side, because they're just transposing marketing from elsewhere in esports where it works. They're thinking, right, well, we're just going to do the same formula and it'll work with these players, right? Who's going to want to watch an interview with the team that's 9th place in the league? Like, who's going to really care as much what they were thinking and why they lost the match? And even if someone's a really great personality and he's really funny, well, for example, trash talk doesn't work if you're losing. So that now has less impact, is less marketable, That's why I say, if I'm them, I would actually be very cynical if I have the Korean players. Like, I would pick the player on your team who's really good, but also has like a bit of a fiery personality. And I would teach him how to trash talk. Like that would go down like how, that would be amazing. Think about how people would latch onto that,
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty interesting how much the top teams, or Seoul in particular, have just gone the entire opposite approach to marketability and signed a load of people that were originally kicked from Lunatic High because their fans had such an uproar about it. It's like now they've got into Overwatch League, they're just like, fuck you, I don't care what you think. We're just going to pick up Zephyr and Munchkin again, and then Philly pick up Sado when they must have known because they have a Korean coach, they have a Korean player. Like they didn't consult with them at all or have any idea. Nobody at Blizzard knew as well. It seems inconceivable. So they have seemingly ignored the marketability approach and literally just gone straight for winning because that's what got them the fans in the first place, right? Was dominating the scene.
I mean, it's not like Ryu Jae-hong just becomes suddenly unpopular though because he's on a team with Zephyr and Munchkin, right? I think they'll be fine in that sense.
I think they'd be well, I don't think the players would be that bad. I think what you're worried about is a lashback on the organization or just your fans decided that they don't want to watch your games or something to boycott them. Korean drama is pretty severe. I mean, they had a petition to kick Zephyr. Was it Zephyr? Yeah. I think it was Zephyr from the roster, yeah. I mean, they get pretty serious about that stuff, and they've just literally
very funny about kimchi as well.
But they've done like a 360 because they started out. who's kimchi? They started
kimchi.
Out,
you know?
Everyone's always talking about him. Apparently, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
That spicy food that the French seem to dislike so much, you know.
That one made a whistling sound as it passed over your head.
Absolutely, the joke was gone, wasn't it? It was. See you later. Right,
you killed it.
Back to France. Yeah.
But back to France. But yeah, they've done a complete 360 because they started wanting to sign these guys, did a 180 when the fans were pissed off, straight back in as soon as they got the Overwatch League spot. This seems mental to me because it's the direct opposite approach of all of,
at the same
not
time,
all of, but most of the North American organizations.
At the same time, they're not really a Korean org, right? Whereas a Korean org might have bent and actually let Zephyr and Munchkin go. Well, probably not Munchkin. I think Munchkin's apologized or whatever for like boosting on the letter or something. I don't remember.
They do.
Yeah. No, I think he might have been removed full on as well because he's been taken out of some of their announcement or something.
Well, that was
Runner,
Sado.
I think, also said that they didn't think he'd been picked up. Oh yeah.
So I think that the other thing is that KSV isn't really a Korean org, even though they have like, I guess they're trying to pick up a bunch of Korean esports now.
Doesn't that mean they're probably just walking into a landmine, like a minefield that they're unprepared for? Because surely the Korean orgs are like that for a reason. They're not just all doing it wrong. Surely they know that the lashback from their fans is going to be severe, so they deal with it beforehand.
I don't know. I think without without Munchkin, this team would be worse though. So.
Oh yeah, definitely would.
Who could believe that the owners of the Korean Seoul Dynasty team don't really know that much about Korean esports?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if the owner was like, so where is Faker? So which one of you is Faker?
To be fair to them,
have you got Boxer on this team?
I mean, they signed a sick team though, to be fair. It's essentially it's an upgraded version of what was the #1 team in the world for a long time.
Yeah, but they've obviously signed some of the coaching guys and the guys in management and stuff as well from Lunatic High. But they're the people that should be advising.
Yeah,
okay,
probably.
By the way,
Munchkin actually, if it was a valid point.
I realise not everyone's like and feels the need to, even when not unsolicited, just tell people things I hate. But there has been a surprising lack of sort of harsh criticism of Boston Uprising, I would say LA Gladiators, like whether or not these lineups end up working. If they do, by the way, this is part of the reason why you should trash them now, because then it will be an amazing accomplishment. People will realize, wow, they went from these expectations up to here. Yeah. That is a true Cinderella story. What an amazing result, But when people have that sort of ridiculous logic, well, no one can really know. Now, I think we can kind of know before the league starts that Seoul Dynasty will probably be pretty good and probably Boston Uprising will probably be shit. That's just pretty reasonable, Like these look like
incredibly.
Like what were the people making these teams thinking?
Yes, they're worlds apart. Boston Uprising team looks ridiculous, and if you've heard anything behind the scenes, their performance in scrims and stuff has also been ridiculous for a team trying to get into the Overwatch League. So Huck did an interview with Travis Gafford recently. Real hard-hitting questions.
Well, but from both sides, it was straight fire in that one.
But
was he giving him a hot stone massage at the time?
It was slightly enlightening. Huck, he didn't full-on say. What did he say? I think the furthest he went was with the underdogs, but if you're looking for a team that's going to come out with upsets or something. But in terms of his process for picking people, said that he valued coachability and stuff like this. Like, or skill,
a funny
possibly,
word for nepotism,
or ability. I don't think he's actually related to them. I think it might be cronyism.
No, it can work with like friends. Oh yeah, cronyism.
Yeah, but yeah, for the Boston team, if he's managed to pull it off and they are not the bottom place, see, other teams could get a meta that just ruins them. Like, for example, San Francisco Shock look like they're a weird looking team.
Yeah. But put it this way, theory craft me a meta in which they win Overwatch League.
Yeah, but there is no situation in which Boston Uprising come top half, I think, unless Hook is a literal genius, you know. And so for the people that saying you have to wait and see, yes, there are massive meta shifts in Overwatch, and sometimes teams that you have no idea suddenly spring to the top. But most of the championship teams, the teams that have literally won, have always come from a core of another team that was doing pretty well. It's very rare that you get someone from 0 to 100 instantly.
Also, here's the weird thing, right? This is something I feel like people didn't really discuss like publicly very much, but behind the scenes, it is known that some of the teams had differing levels of budget. Or, you know, someone could buy this many buyouts. Someone else had to get people who were like free from contracts or, you know, very low buyouts, right? That sounds weird, right? When you hear that someone's bought in for perhaps $20 million, $15 million, right? Because the problem is a naive fan who doesn't run a business thinks to themselves, well, you wouldn't spend 20 million and then say, oh, I'll go cheap on the season. But you have to understand that is actually how businessmen think. What they think is, right, at any moment, I have to be able to pull the plug on this and have spent as little as I needed to see if it was going to work. So I would believe that some of these teams probably didn't have the budget either to get some of the players that they might have wanted. And therefore, I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I would go all in if I was going to do it, but that's not how these people are going to treat their money.
But I think that does look exactly like what's happened with the Boston Uprising, because he signed some players that are, you know, I love the way that they try and spin it is like, names are not important, you know, we look for real talent, we ran the scrims and stuff. It's like, the only reason they're names is because they were winning shit, like proving that they're actually good in tournaments, not scrims on one meta. That blows my mind, the way that they've spun that narrative. Absolutely beautiful PR work by them. But
I mean, we knew that names weren't important when you get a player called Dream Casper. I have a rule, okay? I have a rule in life that there's two things can happen. One, it's actually something where I remember, I think it was on like Ricky Gervais's old podcast, he used to say this. You can sort of tell if a band will make it based on their name. Because, you know, no one ever goes out and goes, Wembley, are you ready for the Dying Raspberries? Like, there'll never be a band that'll sell out Wembley called that. So, you know, I look at some of these names and I go, you better be the best player of all time that makes this name baller. Like, obviously, the name Flower now is straight fire. It's baller as fuck. But that's only because he's so sick.
Yeah, preferred his old aliens.
It's the numbers that makes it a cool name.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Straight hacker.
Yeah. But the thing about having a minimal, budget to be able to work with is that you always knew that if you left it until the end, there would be people gagging for minimum buy-ins to the Overwatch.
There's so
League,
many good players.
Because there's a maximum amount of there's 75,000 pros and there's only 48 spots or whatever. Now, but seriously, there are way more good pros than would actually get signed. So even if you left it right until the end in the dregs, for example, something that people always bring up when you bring up this point is that people didn't know that Rogue and E United and FaZe, I guess, towards the end would be available. But that means that you knew, or you were accounting for 3 sets of extra things in there,
right,
that were then filled up by free agents. So you thought those free agents were free agents, and you could have picked them up at the end. So there was still the same amount of pros at the end that were going to be left over. You just didn't know which ones they were going to be, and you assumed they were the Rogue ones, and perhaps it wasn't going to be the GC Busan ones, and then it ended up being the other way around. And so I think a much better strategy, if you had a limited budget, would have been to strategically wait until the end and see what you could pick up, see who was going in. Now, that might not have been the best solution for the players, but I know there was players who would have gone in for a 50k salary, and you could have at least made a team that was like competitive for the 8th place or something.
Plus, let's say you're in a world where you get down to the end and you don't have a lot of budget, but, you know, let's say, for example, all the really good free agents are gone, which is obviously impossible with how many teams there are, but let's say, hypothetically, most of them are gone. If you have to gamble at the end and spend very little money, that's when you pick up the Korean rookies.
Yeah.
You know, they're the guy I gamble on with very little because they might actually turn out to be amazing. And I don't even have to have him succeed for my team. That's trade bait.
Yeah.
Can trade that guy next season, you know.
To be fair, the guy that Boston signed called Striker is actually a pretty good talent. And Kalios is an alright pickup as well. I didn't realize that they were going to pick up Kalios when they actually, like, when the roster was rumored behind the scenes. He was one of the guys that people left out when they were talking about it. So that might have been a last minute pickup. Both of those are reasonable Koreans if you had like a low budget and were trying to pick up people. So there are a couple of glimmers of okay in there. So you could build on it and make a semi-decent roster, but at the moment it just looks poop.
From my understanding, you say that like they're reasonable pickups for like a low budget, right? But the lowest budget you can go is what, 50k a year, right? The Koreans, from what I've gathered from talking to people in the scene, are absolutely gagging for the owl opportunities because esports over there is so cutthroat and so up and down in terms of you never know when you're going to get cut from a team, and the salaries are awful as well. These guys are living in team houses all together, sharing a bowl of cereal to get them going through the morning. That's all they get for the whole day, right? Depending on how well they perform. Probably exaggerating it a little bit.
But hyperbole there.
No, here's the thing. You're not wrong. Like in Korean esports, even in the ones that are established like League of Legends, the level below, there's always that. Like people don't know. Okay, so there's LCK in League of Legends. Like, yes, now they have like a challenger division below where you can compete to qualify. But in the past, there wasn't one. And you had open qualifiers, but they're like a crapshoot. You never know who you're going to play and when. Right. But there would always be these teams that Westerners didn't know about that were just entire teams that played as if they were pro teams. Everyone in one house with like mattresses on the floor, living in the cheapest part of Seoul, like 2 hours outside the center, eating ramen basically. That's like super cheap. And that's real. Like they would do that, and some of them will never make it.
Yeah.
It's brutal. And there's so many better players than the two you've mentioned that you could pick up for 50k quite easily. I mean, look at Runaway, for example, as a whole team. You might argue that that's the whole squad
there. Yeah, the difference with actually getting people that prove themselves in Apex is a lot of the time they're in organizations that know the price of the players that they're actually sat on. Whereas, I mean, it doesn't really apply to Kalios and Striker because they were in organizations. Oh, actually, Striker had just been dropped because he used to play for Rox Orcas, I believe, and they just dropped their team. So that was probably like a cheap, good pickup. But a lot of the guys in Apex are locked into organizations, and I doubt you could actually buy them without a pretty hefty buyout because they know that they're sat on good Korean talent that other people want. Having said that, if you dip into Apex Challengers, there are teams on players on teams like Seven, Element, Mystic. I don't know enough about Korean organizations to say whether they are just like team names, because they actually do come up with some baller team names that sound like they could be organizations. So I don't know, whether those guys had buyouts or whatever, but there's definitely talent. And that's definitely what I would have been doing, is I would have been watching the shit out of Apex Challengers to find that upcoming talent, because that's where it all is.
All right. Well, I suppose we can move on. I guess a final question then, before we move on too much, would be, I mean, how would you guys build these OWL rosters then? What would your approach be? I mean, I've already gathered an overarching view of everyone, I think, of how they'd approach it. Thorin, you said you just literally slam in the best players and try and win it straight up season one.
I'd probably just try and get the best team. No, I wouldn't necessarily even just pick players. I'd try and get like a complete team if possible. Hopefully one that's very good, and then just go with that. And say then I'll like, if I have to change things later, I think you have the least tweaks from that point of view.
I'd probably have done what Soul did, where you just get the best team in the world and then add to it and make it better.
Now, I do think though that one of the best decisions of any of these teams is Dallas Fuel, because they've picked up just like the incredible Western team, and if there was another one available, for example,
Rogue would have been the obvious one, right?
Yeah, but for me, it doesn't quite work the same because there's no French spot or no European spot to really gather that kind of fan base as well. Whereas with Dallas, you've got it kind of set that. I mean, you don't have it set there because they're all Europeans, but they've been in North America so long that they have such a fat North American fan base, and people just kind of forget that they're European.
That's always my favorite part about geolocation as well. Like, oh, who's going to support someone who's not from their country? Then a guy from Dallas. Oh, I love this guy from Sweden. Kill yourself. Like, that doesn't make any sense. All you're telling me is if the Korean gets good enough English, you will definitely support him. Obviously, because he'd be the best player in your team, wouldn't he?
Yeah. So, but for the French, their culture and their
cunts. Yeah, we get it. But they can overcome that. Just as a Korean could learn English, they could learn to be reasonable and eat cheese that's not about to kill them.
No, my man.
No, you would never say that, obviously.
Absolutely not. But the French guys, if you put them over there, would be kind of the outsiders, and more so than Envious are as a full European team, because they have this French kind of exclusive zone that kind of pervades their team atmosphere. So if they had a European spot, particularly in France, then they would have been an easy pickup as well. But for a team like London, I don't think there was there wasn't an easy pickup there for pretty much any of the other Western spots. Like I wouldn't have gone with FaZe. I definitely would have prioritized getting a better Korean team over FaZe, who were the second best team in North America at the time. But I think Dallas were in the perfect position to be able to capitalize on that.
All right. Okay. So leading on from that one, this is something that I only
Harsha.
Within the last, Harsha's already spoken his piece.
Oh, you said you would have just picked up.
Don't tell me how to do my job, lad. Okay.
I didn't want to rewatch the VOD, you know.
You come to me and like, Bren, come on, we got to sort this out. You're gonna get sacked. Don't step it up.
So I just keep reading off that teleprompter I prepared for you days
Absolutely.
ago. Don't worry,
and I will, and I'll do it well. Don't you worry. So the Moneyball approach, which I only learned the meaning of about 2 hours ago, we're going to talk about that now. Joshua, Sideshow Wilkinson, explain to us what Moneyball is to any of our viewers, including myself, who might not know what it means.
Most of them already know.
Yeah,
no,
you're
forgetting. I am the average viewer. I am the average viewer.
Okay. We'll assume that Bren's the average viewer.
So to be fair, he's the only viewer of this show. So, there we go. He is. He's right. He's nailed it. He's got a target audience. There you go. Him watching the VOD back.
Just F5.
You've obviously
what we don't do with quality, we'll do with quantity. The overall views of the show will end up outpacing OverSight, in the end. The Moneyball approach comes from a film called Moneyball, where they were building. It's like a looking back on when the MLB baseball, for all the people in Gloucester who don't understand what that is. It's where you hit a ball with a stick and then run around. It's a bit like Rounders, but like for some reason fully grown adult men play it. So who knows? Very boring, but it's the story about when they switched over to using statistics. So building their teams out with full stats and really using that as the thing with the heaviest emphasis with which to build your team. And teams haven't gone a full Moneyball approach in Overwatch yet. The stats aren't really there, but certainly every team works with Winston's lab. We've heard stories of like Luna, for example, being cut from Luxury Watch, citing statistics in scrims and stuff. I'm sure there's more to that story, but they definitely convey it to the players from their coaching role. But also there was an interview done by Volumel, I believe, on eSports 7 with Trevor May, who is a baseball player that works within Overwatch, I believe. Like, I don't know whether he does consulting work or something, or is an angel investor for one of the sites or something like this.
He invests in a lot.
But
he invests in Rivalcade and things. So
yeah, but he likes Winston's lab, and he likes the Moneyball approach because he comes from baseball. And so he recently gave an interview where he told Volumel that the stats API had seen what Blizzard are working with that only came out like a week ago, and that some of the OWL teams were already, or he said one in particular was applying a Moneyball approach to how they were building their team. So that's bringing you up to speed on what Moneyball means in the context of esports.
Thank you.
And Thorin's a big fan of the Moneyball approach and really loves how it's utilized as a big stats man himself. And presumably you've seen this attempted to be used in other esports.
Yeah, but here's the thing. This is quite telling. I've never heard it cited as inspiration or the method actually applied in any esport where the person saying it then had success with their team. That way. The reason why the Moneyball aspect spawned a movie, etc., is because a guy took over what I'm not sure, but as far as I know, I don't think it was one of the better baseball teams. And in baseball in particularly, there's a couple of factors which made it massively successful. So first of all, in baseball, the top teams like the Yankees massively outspend a bunch of the other teams. Like the team that's like 10th best in MLB, as far as I know, spends way less than like the Yankees. Secondly, in those sports, first of all, you have a lot of players, so it's not like having like a basketball team where if you actually have LeBron James, you can almost put anyone around him, and you'll get to the playoffs. You'll maybe have a chance to go further. You can kind of like use the eye test a lot more in those other sports. But also, as far as I know, one of the reasons why a certain type of person likes baseball is supposedly it is one of the only sports where statistics are actually quite accurate, and you can basically like measure a lot of statistics that you can't in other sports. Like, for example, in basketball, they have very limited stats. It is stuff like a rebound, a point, an assist, and these can be very vague concepts. Like, what is really a good assist? But all the numbers count on the page, you have to tell that qualitatively. Which rebound is a junk rebound where no one went for it, or which one's like one that was where two people were around and you took it. Again, the stat can't tell you this. Apparently, I don't claim to be an expert in baseball, but in baseball, you can really tell by these metrics a lot more how well someone performed. And so what they essentially did, as far as I know, is instead of using scouts who tell you like what the potential of someone is, they literally took a mathematical approach where they would get someone who, for example, isn't going to go up in his career. He's like towards the end of his career, but he's a cheap player, but he gives you exactly this number in one category. And you would look at your team and say, if we plug that into our team, A, because of this sport, he can replicate it. And B, by taking this overall approach, we can sort of get an overall number at the end. That means we're going to be a very good team. And as far as I know, I think eventually they did go on to win. Did they go on to win the World Series, Harsha?
I have no idea. But
I don't know. But they had some sort of success much beyond what they had before. But as you can see, this wouldn't really apply, as far as I can tell, to anything that's not baseball.
Well, one of the other issues with this approach is that baseball specifically has a huge amount of games, and all these actions are replicated like tons of times.
A lot,
so like it doesn't really apply to
Don't you play over 100 games in the regular season?
162 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's very different to any other esport that I'm aware of.
Even just using the eye test, you can tell why these stats would be more telling of an individual player, because it's mostly like a one-on-one plus how far you're hitting the ball plus how far you're able to run.
Whereas, for example, just take any other sport. If I took a sport okay, here's an example of how the Moneyball approach wouldn't work. Let's say in the NFL, I took a team that had the best wide receiver. So he's the guy who catches the ball and makes the touchdown run. And I thought, right, there's a cheap guy over here who gets like a few touchdowns and he's like the second best receiver on like a lesser team. If I plug him into the other system, he might never get any touchdowns. He might never get the ball. The touches are all going to the other guy. So the numbers wouldn't stack like that. I wouldn't keep the one guy's 13 touchdowns and add the 4 from this guy. That guy might go down to like 1, so it wouldn't stack the same way. And so, yeah, a lot of the concepts just don't apply as far as I can tell to esports games. And especially in this sense, like, for example, each team plays around certain strengths of star players in esports games. That's how you build your team. You don't build your team by putting on paper the best players together, because they wouldn't work together. They wouldn't have the same resources. They wouldn't have the same space created for each other. Some of them might just not be able to play with each other. There's reasons why there'll always be players out there that we'll never understand why people play with them. But it turns out, even though objectively they're not very good at the game, maybe the way that they team play with someone else just perfectly fits their style, and therefore they're so comfortable playing with that guy, So I feel like the problem with that whole Moneyball approach is, this is why they made a movie out of it. It's a great storyline. So if you could do it and you had success, it would be a fantastic approach and you would have taken a new aspect. But I feel like it's massively overblown. So if someone can make it succeed, fair play to them. I haven't seen it succeed outside of that example in baseball, as far as I can.
Do you think it would even work for any team game? Because there's so many different interactions with games where you're playing, even when it's segmented into rounds, for example, and you have the same thing repeating over and over, like, for example, in CSGO or in the NFL and stuff like this. Although it's slightly different in the NFL. I guess it's slightly different in CS as well. It's not the same round that just repeats because of the economy. But
no, because the problem is in CS especially, like the part of the game, in fact, the part that's so difficult to gauge as an outsider is what team play is going on, what comms were given on this move here. You can see what he did with his gun at the end if he killed someone, but you don't know if he knew to look there because he's a brilliant player, or someone gave him a great comm that someone's going to flank you in a minute. Unfortunately, those aspects, those intangibles, first of all, only the team can know that. So the idea that like a general manager could know that, it doesn't work the same way in any way. Like there's not those elements in baseball, as far as I know, of like practicing set plays and stuff. As you say, it's like pitcher versus hitter, and then you have the people who are the outfield players. So it's not a team in the same way. So the problem is all esports games that we're going to talk about, CSGO, Dota, League of Legends, Overwatch, these are team games where the team element can sometimes massively outstrip skill. So I don't really know how you would apply it.
And the biggest thing for Overwatch is that people always talk about it as being the furthest over here in terms of actual individual skill, not mattering as much as how you're playing around your team and your timings and what your system's like. So it seems like the exact wrong game to try.
Think about when we were talking earlier. Like, if you looked at raw skill, how could Lunatic High be that much better than LW Blue? It shouldn't be possible, right? They should at least be comparable. They never were. Yeah. In the long run, if you take it over enough tournaments.
Yes. Especially later on. Yeah. Because a lot of it comes down to intangible stuff. So how do you think a team would do? So there is allegedly one team in the Overwatch League that is attempting this. Who do you think it is?
If I had to guess, are you ready? I would guess it's the LA Gladiator.
You think?
I don't know. I have no inside information, but if I have to guess, they have enough people in their organization who are smarmy enough and think you can run numbers and get metrics and also all the buzzwords that you would use in a middle marketing management meeting where you're trying to pitch something to someone and you had a spreadsheet and Microsoft Publisher. They're all over that shit. They're so deep in that game, it's unreal. So my problem is I think a lot of that applies to like running teams. might just be completely off, might have just absolutely slandered a team for no reason, in which case...
I can definitely see that being the case for their supports at the very least. I can see an argument to be made for that might be how they built out their DPS players.
Who would you guess it is?
For me, I think it might be... it's a difficult one. I think it could be San Francisco Shock.
Okay.
Because their system seems so weird, and they prioritized getting really high-level
have good
individual players so early on. Like, some of them don't make sense, but perhaps that's also another indication.
The San Francisco Shock team looks like someone who knows, like, Overwatch made a fantasy team. Where, you know, when you do fantasy football, you can't pick all the best players because, you know, they're all going to go in the first round. But you sort of go, right, I'm going to be smart. I'm not going to take the best player. I'm going to take, like, you know, the fifth one. And then I'm going to take another guy in my next round. And you end up with, like, a good average team and you try to win just by average points. It does look a bit like that when you see it.
Yeah, it looks like that on paper. Now, I have no idea how they've actually built the team out. But the fact that they were bidding for Sinatra so early when he's, like, he's a statistically very good guy on paper. And then they've also got guys like Super. They've got like sleeper picks. That's Sleepy. The stupidest way to describe Sleepy in the world. But, you know, guys that you haven't really heard of, but reportedly performed well in the scrims and stuff. So I could see how that could be the roster. The LA Gladiators, though, is a pretty interesting one because the guy that they hired as their coach or the general manager, I don't know what his position was, Deepay.
He worked with some of them before.
Worked with Kungana, and so. Allegedly, this is what XQC was talking about recently in this Twitch clip that went viral on the Reddit, was that he just instantly hired Bishu and Remix because they were the tanks that he worked with. But the way that he's filled around them does look like it could be a Moneyball kind of approach because Shaz and Big Goose were two of the best. Well, they were actually two of the best, but they were also the two of the best statistically. And that was one of the cases where, actually, if you're working off Winston's lab, the way that they've done their qualitative rating system, actually they've put like work into making the stats reflect how good someone is most of the time. So it's like half of the difficult part of Moneyball has already been done for you because they've weighed it up with their own qualitative, like the eye test as well. And they tweak their algorithm every time it churns out some idiot that doesn't make sense, you know? So
here's the problem with the LA Galaxy.
Doing it off the numbers.
The problem with the LA Gladiator lineup though is that just feels like they went for everything and failed it at all. Like they tried to get marketable players. Okay, you got Shawfor. Like I actually know Bishu from League of Legends. He's actually he's not very outgoing guy, but he can speak English very well. He's actually basically American, by the way. He's just ethnically Korean. So he's one of those fake Koreans. Those guys, okay, I could believe a market, right? First of all, just the fact that these guys are Finnish, I can already tell you they're not marketable. Like people who are from Finland, like their emotions take place entirely in their fucking imagination. You'll never access their emotion. They're waiting to be invaded by Russia and killed at any moment. They are stern people who are they're set to the cold and they know that life is hard. Okay.
Honestly, Finland is hilarious because they are either like that or they're like the most outgoing, drunkard Viking people in the world, like Taimu, like Zappis.
That's why Taimu doesn't play for a Finnish team, though.
Yeah,
exactly.
Zappis did. Fraggy was more of the kind of composed, but also pretty fun. Shaz and Big Goose can't say I've had that many interactions with them. They don't strike me as the most marketable players.
I could be wrong.
Very good support players.
I'll leave room that I'm wrong, but I'm just going to go ahead and take a wild guess that someone from Brazil and someone from Puerto Rico aren't super marketable to a Western audience. Like I don't feel like they instantly are a shoe in there. So this team looks like you tried to get sort of good players and sort of marketable players, and not get too many Koreans. Like you eased up with the fake one. You got the Korean light, but you ended up with a bunch of nothing as a result. It's like, what area is your team going to succeed in? Apparently Moneyball. Maybe they're just going to Moneyball. That's
it. Maybe. I think it looks like a middle of the road kind of team on paper. They've got potential to be explosive if they have.
Also, how come they have so few players?
I don't understand why. Well, I mean, I've heard things about Misfits or Miami, I get, or Florida. I don't know why they're Florida.
Yes,
Florida.
They also have very few.
Yeah, they have 6 players. I don't know why Gladiators.
They only have 6.
So how does that work then if you only have enough players to play? I mean, in the LA have 7, but is it not? Can you add more before the mid-season break or whatever the fuck we're going to talk about?
No.
No, the signing period at the beginning of the season is closed now. So these.
Isn't the gamble on these teams ludicrous?
Yeah. You have nobody to. So if somebody just has permanent land jitters, or if somebody gets sick or something like that, you have no you have no options to fall back on essentially.
Well, this is why I'm a little bit open to giving Huck a break with building what looks like on paper a really shit budget team, is that you could try and create a really good team for the first season.
Okay.
And because
I thought you were going to say,
so...
to be fair, he's made 2 really shit budget lineups, and now he has the option of which ones to use. So.
no, my point is that everyone's so untested all across the scene that who knows, even if you put your best efforts into creating a team, there are so many unknowns going into Overwatch League Season 1 that it could all just fall apart around you. So in some sense, treating Season 1 like it's impossible to get right, unless you spend vast amounts of money picking up a team or a core or something, and then just trying to make alterations for Season 2 once there's some more known quantities in terms of how these players will perform at LAN, how they did last season, stuff like that. I can see how that might work if he's saving his budget for Season 2, but that would be really planning for the future. And by that time, you might have just completely ruined your reputation, and now you're just the shit team forever.
Presumably the reputation thing won't be that bad because they are planning to add more teams in future seasons. So, like, it's not like people are going to be buying in with... I mean, maybe they are, but...
Mate, can you not see a world in which Boston Uprising goes 0 for 42 or however many games there are, and they're just the meme of the scene for the next 3 years? I can definitely see that.
But what happened if they...
I mean, look how long C9 is a meme, like, already.
Right, but what happens if they turn that around?
But also, just NRG, it's still a meme.
Yeah.
And they had a couple of mediocre rosters, but they never had a roster that was just... No, actually, they did have a roster that was just downright tragic, but they didn't even play for that long. That's the thing. Memes stick.
Yeah, fair enough.
This reputation thing is like, it's actually important, even if you're planning for the future. If you have a team that absolutely just sucks balls in the first season, you're really risking the reputation of the brand.
You know, you got to throw enough shit at the wall till something sticks. As was overheard in the Boston Uprising recruitment meeting. That was the tagline that we're going with for this season.
Harsha, did you give us your team as what you thought was the?
See, I would say Boston just because it seems like such a the word you would use is a mishmash of players.
No, actually, Bren would use mix mash.
Sorry, mix
I was watching his stream earlier, saw another classic Brenism, mix mash.
As was rounded applause, but
rounded applause.
I didn't even say that. I didn't even say rounded applause. You're putting these Brenisms in my mouth now. Okay, you're not even giving me the benefit of the doubt here when it comes to it. You're just literally making them up and saying it. Everyone just believes you at this point because I do it so often. Like I don't actually have any credibility at this point to deny it.
Stick.
Meme stick, exactly.
I mean,
so you reckon Boston?
Well, I would think. I was going to say I think it'd be Gladiators, but I think it would look like Boston because they have such a weird mix of players, and because all of these players never played together except for the Toronto eSports guys. But just because of the Toronto eSports guys, and also because they picked up Gamsu, who I wouldn't say is like an outstanding tank. I thought he was good, but not like great, essentially, in Korea. It seems like they did have some preconceived notions going into this, so I think it would probably end up being Gladiators with what you guys said, where probably Bishu and Remix were picked up really early on. They kind of went Moneyball after Surefour, and then everybody else filled in later.
See, I could be open to the idea that it was Boston, except the roster was so ridiculous that I went and looked them all up on Winston's lab to like see whether it was some kind of ridiculous, insane approach, and all of their stats were incredibly mediocre or non-existent.
Here's the problem. That team is actually the exact opposite of a Moneyball approach. The whole point of Moneyball was it went counter to the traditional philosophy, which, by the way, is in every sport, which is that you have scouts who tell you who to hire. And the idea of a scout is he's an old guy who's watched the game loads, and he'll know, based on like, I think this guy's got potential, you can pick him up even though he's not that great now. If anything, they've gone the opposite approach because they've had Huck just go, I played with these guys in a team. I think they could probably make it. That's the opposite of Moneyball. And they have no fucking money. And they're not balling. Case closed.
Two necessary things that you need to take part in it. But I feel like you've nailed it down to the two potential rosters there. See, I was thinking too narrowly. I was looking at all of these teams, and I just thought, what's the first player who stats wise is fantastic, but otherwise, across the board really fits in with his team. And I was thinking Florida Mayhem. Logix was the man who came to mind. But if that was the case,
Moneyball stretching back into the dark times of 2016.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you'd be looking at more than 6 men on a roster if that was the case, which they haven't done. So you make a good argument for the Gladiators.
What about the Valiant team? They have some like good players, but it's like a weird mashup of players, right?
It is a really weird.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, kind of, but they actually already had a core, exactly. And they're just kind of adding players to it. And the players that they've added are pretty well known for having big performances over the courses of lands. They're not like statistical outliers, I don't think, as well. They're just big names. So it would be weird to me if that was some kind of Moneyball, because you could have done that incredibly easily just by scouting properly and realizing that the guys from...
Because that is the other part that people don't understand. Like the Moneyball approach is not just getting a load of good players. The idea is you're getting like the player that someone else wouldn't recognize as good because he thinks, oh, well, that player, for example, is a really old player, or he only gives you this stat here. And the idea is you've scouted that one stat or the production level he gives you, A, is replicable, and B, would like complete your team and bring the whole to a higher level than like the sum of it, than the individual parts.
They've acquired good people, to be fair. I mean, Soon and Silkthread are both good additions. Unco as well, a great addition. Numlocked, actually, even though you wouldn't think of him as being possibly even an owl-worthy tank, the last performances before he played in Contenders with Envision, where he was playing well, were like back in the early days of 2016. Yeah, like when he was playing with Creation eSports and Dignitas. But he has a very different style to Fate, I think, and so they'll probably run the two and like play Fate as the aggressive Winston guy, and if they need a passive Reinhardt, if the meta's kind of like that, then they might run Numlocked or something. I can see that being a decent pickup. Space is another one that fills this chasm of a off-tank diva hole within their team. So I think they've made smart pickups. It just doesn't seem like a Moneyball approach. It seems more like decent scouting. Just realizing that there's good talent available.
And they went for younger talent.
So, I mean...
Well, I mean, for some of them, right? They went for veterans in terms of Unco, Soon, and Numlocked, and they went the opposite way with Silkthread, Grim, Agilities, Space. So it seems like kind of they're trying to mix both, like, having a team for the future and then having stars for right now.
Who were the best talent outside of the Overwatch League, then? Because we've gone through a lot of these big talent names. Thorin's raising his eyebrows. I know he's a big, he knows the Overwatch scene.
I've got a DM I could pull up right now from Harsha with half the answers. I've got connections, motherfucker. Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, but what? So list off some names to me. So immediately Zappis comes to mind as one of the
AKM. Yeah. Runaway.
AKM as well.
AKM's another big one.
Evolve Runaway.
Do we know Runaway for sure?
Yeah, they're not going to be here.
What do you mean? For sure they're not going to be an owl?
For sure that it's not locked out. I mean, I've been hearing rumors about some, obviously not for the first half at least, but mid-season I've been hearing some whispers.
Who'd they go to?
Mid-season sign the whole of Owl?
Yeah.
Sign the whole of Runaway?
The only team...
Well, at least some of the players.
The only team that could sign all of Runaway
some of the players.
would be Florida.
Yeah. And can you imagine what a horrific mess of it? In fact, that'd be the worst situation for the Florida guys as well. They've been signed up. They've been grueling for the whole of 2016. They finally made it. They got the back in from the big sports team. They get in. They narrowly lose out in Contenders. That's enough of a gutting performance already. Get into the Overwatch League. Right, this is where we're actually performing. First half of the season goes really well. Sorry guys, you're replaced with Runaway. That would be just brilliant. Just full on 6-in, 6-out swap. All of the Swedes are on the bench.
But yeah, okay. Point still remains. We listed up a couple of names.
Perform well.
I mean, there's a lot of Koreans, isn't there?
Yeah.
They're also the meta
There's a
Dina
lot of
people.
Korean names.
It's like Saya player won't be in the league.
That's true.
At least Libero got in, but I guess Hoon.
My boy Hoon. Where he at?
Where's that boy?
Yeah, but there's still enough Western players to make really good rosters as well. I mean, the fact that Fact Fiction isn't in,
Rolf, Adam,
along with other
Davin.
But also, there's
here's
a
the question I have for you. Okay, so
tanks.
you guys have a lot more insight to the scene and like behind the scenes stuff than I do. So how do you explain the fact that there's not a single team that even for a bench position wants at the end, right before the trade deadline, to sign AKM?
Makes sense.
Like I know people use the logic of, oh well, all the buyouts were so high for the rogue players, etc. Like, well, that leverage only works if you are going to join the league. If you're going to get nothing, then it's worth nothing.
No.
Like now, AKM's just sat there.
At the end, he didn't have a buyout because Rogue just dropped them.
That makes even less sense.
I don't know why no team was willing to throw him a bone. It doesn't really make sense to me.
Well, a couple of the teams, I think, I don't know whether a couple of the teams were. Flame says when he had this stream that he was doing, that AKM approached Flame and asked to be on Flame's team for minimum salary, and Flame says that he declined him, saying that he wouldn't be able to pay him what he was worth. He'd have to offer him a minimum salary and just to hold on until the mid-season signings, where he would be like this ridiculous hot commodity if people's hitscan DPS players are sucking a fat one.
Even then,
and then you would be able to sign them. But there's no way that, even if Flame was nice, there's no way that he approached all of the owners and they were all that nice. And there are a lot of teams where he would be an upgrade over the guys that they got.
But what I think is silly is that he's just left out to kind of dry there, where he has no salary for what, 3-4 months presumably.
Yeah. I mean, he was on Rogue for a long time.
Right. What I mean is that like there's a world where this guy should be signed. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's the case of a lot of players,
especially the teams that have like 2 DPS. Like, I think, doesn't the Florida team have only 2 DPS?
I don't think he'd work well in Florida, to be fair, because there's like the existing thing between him and Vic. I don't know if that would be an issue or not, but there are a lot of teams that don't have that many DPS players where he would have just fit like a glove. The other issue is that he has a visa, so like all the other Europeans, you can at least kind of excuse that because there's time taken to get a visa. You have to put money into that, et cetera, et cetera. But like AKM already has his visa, so that's not even an excuse.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to actually find a team where he would plug directly into because nobody's really missing that slot. But a lot of people have worse players in that slot. Yeah, and certainly, I mean, I can see reasons why people wouldn't want to sign him just because they feel like they've already filled that slot and they've already started practicing with that team or whatever. But also, there's another thing with AKM that is a genuine downside to him, is that most of the time when you have a hitscan DPS player, you're expecting them to fill the Tracer role, which is a hero that has been arguably the most meta-defining for, a full year now? Has just been at the forefront of the meta ever since Soon was playing him in DreamHack Winter. When people weren't running that much Tracer.
But at the same time.
And so the fact that you have a hitscan player that just isn't that good on Tracer, you need like a Tracer 1 trick alongside him to be able to work like Soon. And then you probably need another guy because then you don't have a flex DPS. This was the entire issue that Rogue ran into and the reason that they were so inflexible. So by inviting AKM into the team, you're kind of hoping that you don't get stuck in that situation or he just rides the bench.
At the same time, during the last Apex, one of the better compositions was having Tracer plus Soldier 76 together. So I don't know if you necessarily need your hitscan to be a Tracer player as well.
No, I'm not saying you need it. I'm just saying that is a genuine downside of the guy. It's not like he's just this world-class talent on every hitscan DPS that can just plug into every team.
But that's also the part to him. Like, that's the part that is bizarre to me about whether some of these teams are made. Like, if I have, 12 slots, is 12 the maximum amount of players you can have?
Yeah.
Okay, if I have 12 spots, the 2 positions I'm definitely doubling up in is tank and fucking DPS, because those are the ones where if the meta completely shifts, some of your players are just shit out of luck. They're just not going to be as good, I'm amazed at some of these teams that just have bare bones rosters,
It's pretty interesting, actually. Because I've just gone through it now. I'm not properly rigorously done this before, where I've gone through and thought which team AKM could be slotted into. But actually, when you look at it, I mean, he's not going to slot into any of the 3 Korean teams. He's not going to slot into Houston Outlaws because they already
just throw
declined
him
and so there's a reasonable reason.
San Francisco.
He's not going to fit into San Francisco because mate, they've
replaced someone in San Fran because
they've already signed them for Overwatch League salary for contracts. They can't just.
No. I'm not saying now. I'm saying theoretically, right? You could replace him, right?
Oh, sure, but not signing him at the end of the season when you've already got like 3 hitscan DPS players on your roster. He's not going to fit in the Shanghai Dragons. He's not going to fit into Dallas Fuel or Florida Mayhem. So there's 4 teams that you could reasonably add into.
Man. We're not going to sit here and bullshit and pretend like all these NA DPS players are reasonable to be in the fucking Overwatch League. Like, is NA DPS a position you consider a super skilled position, is it?
No, definitely not.
No one even knows what an NA DPS player is because all the DPS players in the NA teams were fucking Europeans.
Yeah, but when you've got a guy like Baby Bay signed to your roster, it doesn't make sense to add AKM because the guy is just like Baby Bay is like slightly worse, but just covers all the same heroes. So you've literally just got someone on your bench, and it's not like Baby Bay has been with. Like you might sell yourself on the fact that you think Baby Bay has the potential to get to where AKM was without you shelling out the 50k or whatever.
The projectile heroes as well.
Well, so does AKM.
Oh, yeah,
AKM plays
Farah very
yeah,
well.
AKM
That
plays
was-
Farah. He doesn't play the
We only
Genji
found
stuff.
out about the Farah after the signing window ended,
Right.
anyways.
Supposedly,
could-
he said that players did. Well, he's
No.
he's been working on it in
His
his spare
Farah's,
time. No?
yeah, his Farah's been out for months, but to the point, you could easily sign him for Boston Uprising, and that would be just a killer addition to the team.
LA Gladiators.
Now the question is, would AKM actually go to Boston Uprising? And since they haven't given him a salary offer, probably not. I think.
What choice does he have though?
Well, being a mid-season signing, I think is a
I think people are
reasonable
putting
choice for
too
him.
many eggs in that basket. Like that means
maybe.
that means, by the way, you have to get on a team now in Contenders and probably do something in the Contenders, which
Yes,
that format's wacky enough as it is. So a couple of things go wrong, and some mega players are going to just not look that great. And then remember, part of the problem here is who is the person who's doing the recruiting and who is the person who has to sign off on it. Like the owner guy isn't going to understand that this guy is super amazing. Like imagine trying to tell one of the owners of these teams, oh, this guy used to be really good on Rogue. Who's that? Well, this team that like were winning all the online cups in America before Overwatch League. Well, yeah, but there wasn't any Overwatch before Overwatch. No, but there kind of was. And then you can sort of see like the fucking little chip that Blizzard's implanted behind the guy's eyeball starting to malfunction and like send a homing signal, like
He also could get signed to either of the LA teams, Gladiators or Valiant. Valiant have already got a massively full roster.
I mean, I realize you're going to say,
Gladiators or
no,
Fusion.
but wait a minute. They've already got 3 and 4 DPS. Yeah, half of them are shit. Get them out.
Yeah.
Get them out.
That's true. That's true.
Exactly.
So, I mean, and for the
At this
Gladiators.
point, even if you've already signed those players, you've already basically burned that money. So that money's gone. You can't get that back. Spend some good money. You got to spend money, make money. Get this guy in.
Yeah.
I'm going to be his agent. I'm going to take over. I'm going to Jerry Maguire this motherfucker. I'm going to get him into the Overwatch League.
There's tanks that I feel got overlooked. Like the fact that Fact Fiction, Tonic is another massive one. But then when you step down a level to like guys that could have potential, like Korsti, Mauzasa, Christopher, Reinforce even, if you wanted to try him out, because he did play in like a team that was doing really well for a really long time.
I like the way that's a thing as well, right? So, I only signed these shit players because they are marketable, then signed the ultimate shit player who's marketable. Checkmate. Checkmate.
Yeah, but that just puts emphasis on the fact that that's not really an excuse.
It isn't, is it? No, I think people reverse engineer all their moves. So if they get like a Korean team, they go, I was trying to win the league this season and I'm very fiscally responsible. I wanted the return on investment. And then the guy who has no budget's like, I'm kind of looking to develop talent. I'm looking for the next stars of like, fuck off. You just telling me whatever your end condition were. You never went into it with those dreams. And then some other guy is just like, maybe it's Huck, who knows? He's just literally like waited, and it's like his homework. He just put off the assignment until the day before. And they're like, have you got that team for Overwatch League? And he goes, oh, fucking hell. I was watching that movie marathon last night, but I was watching Moneyball. Have any of you seen the movie Moneyball? Comes in with a fucking Auckland Athletics hat on. Nice day for a ball game, isn't it, sir? Like, fucking hell.
It kind of feels like that with Flames team as well, because he picked up so much of FNO GFE, like he just wandered into it and just picked up the
He just has too many friends that are not.
There's a lot of TF2 players in that team.
But the thing that he was talking about with the Tracer as well, there's still good Tracers that haven't been signed. There's people. There's Davin for starters.
Davin's crazy.
There's Valu, there's Saya player if you want to go over to like Korean guys who's an excellent Tracer. I mean, there's a number of Tracers and actually probably some guys in Apex Challengers I have no idea about who are probably better than all of these idiots. But then there's also like Mikey A is also a really legit Tracer that you could.
How was Harsha not brought up Stitch?
Yeah, true. Also, actually.
Yeah,
but I don't
betrayed him.
Well, I think the thing is,
but yeah, he actually tried to sign Stitch.
Yeah, I think the thing about Stitch is they wouldn't sign unless the entirety of Runaway was signed.
Okay.
No. I think Runner actually came out and spoke recently and said that Stitch got an offer and they all told Stitch to go, but Stitch wanted to stay with the team. Yeah,
Weird.
Runner came out recently and said that he's been like trying to persuade. He said that there was even one guy, and he wouldn't name the person, that he threatened to kick out of the house unless they took the Overwatch League offer, and they wouldn't. So I don't know how much of this is like PR of like, I've created such an amazing atmosphere or whatever. Yeah. But it does seem like that. It does seem like he's really fostered a good situation there where they just actually do want to get signed as a full team now. Everybody on that team. Otherwise, they're never going to be in Overwatch League and they're just going to be farming Apex forever, which isn't too bad.
Oh, best competition apparently.
There's Definitely barely a fraction of the money in Apex, though.
Yeah.
For now.
So,
you could also just sign. You could also just sign the entirety of like Africa Freaks, MVP Space, like the old LW Red team. A lot of these teams, and like tweak a couple of the things that were going on.
Well,
who knows what the buyouts were for those teams, right?
If you're going to take Koreans, you might as well go for the
strong teams,
top of the line ones.
Oh, Runaway, yeah, sure,
for sure. So outside of the OWL, we've got a lot of players, right? A lot of these free agents are obviously going to have to be making contender teams to show their worth and whatnot, because they can't just sit on the sidelines, like you said, Thorin. Can't be like trying to sell these investors the fact, they were good at some point. They're going to need to be playing and have results as well.
Oh.
Do you think this contenders model then is going to be sustainable? Because we don't have any information on it at all. Like, not even us as casters, right? We, me and you, Josh, we did season 1. We've got no information at all. We've constantly had these pro players coming up to us, like saying on the sidelines. So,
couldn't possibly comment.
So how about that season 2 knowledge then? Give us the inside information, and we're like, no, we're in the dark just as much as you are. It is a bit of a tricky situation for a lot of these players, because they don't have that, that backup plan for them that a lot of these guys and Owl do. Hunting for the words there for a sec, but
that's not like you.
Not like me at all. My grasp of the English language is fantastic, but impeccable, of course. Do you think Contenders is a sustainable sort of model then for these players?
Well, let's just outline what Contenders is first, right? We don't know how many times it's going to run per year. It could run up to, literally it could run 5 times a year, but that seems very unlikely. It's more likely it's going to run 3 to 4 times a year, just judging by the length and how many they could fit in and stuff like that. At the moment, it's $100,000 per region for Europe and North America, with like 40K for first place, and then it trickles down, They could increase that, but that's what it's at the moment. And the viewership is likely to be pretty low when you've got Overwatch League going on at the same time, because these teams, even though people that are really keyed into the scene are going to know, that some of these teams could be legit. Some of the Contenders teams, judging by the talent that's available, could be better than not half, but they could be better than a quarter of the Overwatch League teams. If they really suck balls, and there's some really good Contenders teams. But that's the situation with Contenders, and people are worried that organizations won't see the value to invest in there and won't be able to give them salary, and therefore players won't be able to grind enough to be able to actually get into, or rather be able to sustain themselves to be able to then get into Overwatch League later on. So that's also the major concern for people.
Like, will it be like in the past where there's an online component that leads into a LAN? Will it just be online for some of the seasons? Because these are all things that completely change the complexion of the tournament. Like, for example, as you're saying, people just assume automatically, this is going to be like the next big stage that you prove yourself on, right? If it's an online tournament, I think instantly the attention goes down there. Obviously, the production won't be as good. Then you got to add in, what if in NA, for example, as far as I can tell with the NA landscape, every team that wanted to get an Overwatch League is in or is now massively soured against Overwatch League and is like, fuck the Overwatch League, I'm out. And in fact, lots of them are now in the NALCS. So those people don't seem like they're sticking around. Like, I'll wait for the second round. It doesn't look like there's that many people who have like big budgets and a lot of investment who feel that way. So what's it going to be like if you're playing in an online competition, but you're in Kongana or something? You have to join a team like that, maybe, So then you have to add the element of, what if one becomes favored over the other? What if people only watch NA Contenders? And that's where you have to perform. So now if you're a European guy, you're in a European team, maybe that's not as favored. Like, with no information, there's so many ways it could go wrong.
Well, one of the big issues, I think, with Contenders is that if you are in, I guess with the regions rather, is that if you're in Europe, you have no ability to scrim with Overwatch League teams. Whereas while you probably won't be able to in North America often, you at least have the ability to if you're, living on. And
that actually feels like a much more biased way to get players, because I think players themselves will say, we want this guy we scrimmed against and is good. They're not going to go, this guy in European Contenders that no one knows how good it is doing well against, again, teams we've never played against and don't know. So I could already see a world where if I'm like AKM, you better use that visa and get on a fucking NA team, man.
I think it's very unlikely, actually, that any of the Overwatch League teams even scrim against the Contenders teams. Not because they're outside the skill difference. But the thing is, maybe the shit.
You know what I mean? Because people will want to not scrim against them as well.
No one will want to scrim against them. Yeah, but outside of that, the actual reasonable teams will all be playing on the LAN client. And the LAN client is so different to the other client, you literally can't play against them. And none of the people in Contenders, I think, will have access to the LAN client while they're there. So they'll all just be playing within themselves because the situation is sufficiently different for it to be poor practice to play online.
But isn't there also the factor, though? Like, wouldn't there also be an extenuating factor? Like, for example, I don't know how many games a week you play in first season of Overwatch. Do you know roughly?
3.
2 a week.
Okay, so if I'm playing 2 opponents, I'm not scrimming those opponents. And then, am I really going to necessarily scrim the guy I'm playing the very next week? Maybe not. So you see what I mean? Your pool does go down. Yeah. And also, remember, you might have ex-teammates on these Contenders teams. So you've got the natural links anyway. I could see it being like a split.
The other issue is that there's only a limited amount of LAN. Like, not all 12 teams will be able to practice on LAN client at the same time. Put it that way.
Okay.
Will they not?
Do we not have the technology?
All the teams are going to be practicing in that Overwatch League state or whatever Blizzard Arena, right? And there's not 12 rooms with 12 PCs or whatever it is.
I think there are.
You think so?
Yeah, the facilities are quite good.
Yeah, why would they build? Yeah, it's a massive facility. Why would they have built a facility where they couldn't have everyone practice together if they're all playing together? I think they definitely do. I mean, we've been down there and there wasn't 12 at the time, but they were still literally building them. And they had, what did they have there?
They had like 4 rooms with 6 PCs in each.
Oh, they had more than that when we went down there. I think they had 12. They had 12, but they were just inside curtains when we went down.
PCs. They
were still
there
were
definitely not 12 PCs.
Blizzard,
not 12 PCs each. They had 6 PCs, but 12 spots for all of the people who went to playoffs.
That was actually one of the
eight
that was
spots.
a recommendation. There was only 8 spots. There weren't 12. But okay, regardless, that's not that big of a deal. But I mean, I think there will be opportunities, just not many. I guess is the issue.
Well, I mean, it's split into 2 divisions, right?
The divisions are almost meaningless.
Are they? Do the teams
they
not
are
play?
at the moment.
So put it this way.
No, they do cross. That's why they're useless.
Yeah.
Right.
Or rather,
the only things division do is the top team from each division automatically qualifies for playoffs.
You just get a seed, like the NBA and the NFL. That's a mini game within their shit seasons.
But the thing about Contenders that I think we got bogged down with of like all the other possible things that could go wrong is that in the end it just boils down to whether or not organizations find it sustainable to stay in there. I
can't see how it could be. Like, that's why I ask if it's online, because like if it's online, okay, fair enough, then we don't have to actually pay for people to go to tournaments.
No, I think it's definitely going to be online because the whole of Contender Season 1 was online, and so I think this will be online. So the question boils down to then is how many times is it running per year and what kind of viewership do you get? Like what kind of sustainable viewership? Oh, what the fuck am I talking about? How much viewership do you get to be able to leverage that? Okay. And then also, can you lock people in to be able to sell them? If you manage to find a lot of talent, can you then sell them to Overwatch League teams when they look mid-season or when they look at the end of the season? Because I can see that being fairly profitable for people.
Oh, I have a question actually. So was it ever resolved as to whether an Overwatch League can also have a contender?
We don't actually know if this is the case or not.
Because that's a big factor in itself.
It is. That's
what I would actually imagine is that they might encourage Overwatch League teams to buy into Contenders and help that. I mean, make it sustainable in that sense. I don't know if that's going to be the case.
Kai said something weird about it, right? Which was the whole reason why people have no idea is because not only have we not been given any information, but I think that Kai said something like, Envious will be running a team, but it won't be directly through Envious or something
like that. It won't be through Dallas Fuel.
He said something weird like that. Yeah, he said it wouldn't be through like the Dallas Fuel brand. It would have to be through some circuitous route, but almost like they had to run it.
No,
there was something weird like this.
I think Envy could run a team, but I think it couldn't be affiliated with Dallas Fuel in any way.
I see. Right. They just don't want the brand extending downwards outside of Overwatch League. But I mean. That's an okay system. It allows you to have farms. The things that I'm most interested in is whether or not organizations can actually create a system from Contenders that allows them to sell talent effectively. Because there are farm teams in other games, and there are organizations in other games that get really shit viewership as well. So, I mean, I don't know enough about running an org to know whether or not like a certain level of viewership or a certain ability to sell players. What's the level at which it becomes sustainable, you know?
Some teams, some orgs, from what I know, again, I know very little about running an org, but there's a lot of organizations I know that will build these rosters and say, for example, Contenders, try and win the thing, and then they'll have these buyouts they're trying to make a bit of money off it, right? Trying to get their team to be bought into the Overwatch League, and then they can make money off the buyouts. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how viable that would be, given the fact we've got zero information. But
yeah, but if you consider the buyout sums of some of these players must have been large. I mean, I don't know whether they strayed into the 6-figure areas, but they definitely were at the high 5 figures. I'm sure some of them were. And so if you manage to actually lock down good talent, if you've got good scouting and you perform reasonably well in Contenders, that could be a profit for you just off selling. Could that be a profit for you, just selling a single player for one season? I think it could, right? That would be like a reasonably sustainable system. And because, as well, the whole thing with Overwatch, the reason why a lot of the lower level organizations, I think, decided to leave was because you had crazy salary inflation right at the beginning of the game. Like back in December last year, when nothing had been announced, even people were on like 3-4K salaries. How in the hell was that ever going to be sustainable unless it carried on with this ridiculous pace of expansion?
Yeah, but you only needed to wait 3/4 of a year for the Overwatch League to start.
Yeah,
no problem, right?
It was nuts. But then, if you dial it back to like, so you're paying people 1-2K, that's like if people are scrimping along, players that are really dedicated to playing Overwatch, and then you're gonna try and sell people for 100K or whatever, and you've got the potential of having some viewership. I don't know. I think 10K viewership.
10K might be.
I don't think you'll make 20K, to be honest. 20K for the playoffs, maybe, because they made 40K for the playoffs this season of Contenders.
But this had Overwatch
and I
caliber.
imagine that it would.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I can imagine it being somewhere around 10K.
One thing you're not really considering is the fact that the viewership is awful for the EU region. And I imagine Contenders
not for
EU.
Contenders. Not for Contenders EU.
For OWL, sorry. OWL is in the times that the schedule's working out for the format. Doesn't fit EU time. Well, it doesn't.
The Saturday ones are actually all right. The Saturday ones start at 2 p.m. Pacific time, which is 7 p.m. No, 10 p.m.
It's 11, I believe.
11
Central
Europe is 9 hours past PST.
Okay. Yeah, Central.
So I'm going off that.
I'm working off British time.
Yeah, you're an idiot then.
We invented time.
I mean, we've left. We
literally invented time. That's why Greenwich is where, that's where time comes from. Have you ever been to the observatory?
I haven't. No.
It's like Greenwich.
Split into two, right? Is it the 2 time zones in London? I don't know.
Are there 2 time zones?
I'm out. Leave that. Yeah, it depends if you go into Hogwarts or not. If you could stay in the month.
Platform 9 and 3/4.
Oh man, give up.
Of course. Don't worry about it. But no, in terms of the start times, you're saying it's not too bad, but it's 11 p.m.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So Contenders, if it goes by the previous format, I imagine it's going to be starting, early morning NA. In which case, the viewership is actually quite good. The times is quite good for EU, so they're going to have a bit of Overwatch to watch. I imagine you're going to be able to scrape up a few figures. I would imagine it would hit the previous levels.
No, I really can't see it hitting the previous levels because people were tuning in for teams that they'd followed the whole time. It was like the hardcore viewer base was all there. So I can see it taking a dip. I mean, they're still going to follow players, right? If you're a big fan of AKM, you're still going to tune in. There's still going to be teams that are playing reasonably well, and people watch the OPC Pacific teams on the English Twitch stream, and that still gets a couple of K. So the viewership is not going to be non-existent, but still, does that make it reasonable for an organization to invest? Because at the moment they're all leaving as well. There were 3 organizations within the past week that have left, knowing that they only have to stick on for another 2 weeks to get Contenders.
How about this scenario as well? So we're all imagining a scenario where a good player that we want to see in Overwatch League goes into a Contenders team. This team does well. He gets picked up by the Overwatch team squad, right? Problem with that scenario is, imagine that the teams who stick around, either they're small esports orgs who just can run a team very cheaply because it's online and they're just in the game anyway, or it's someone who's doing the plan that you're saying, which is try to make money from the player. Right, if my entire plan, let's say I sign AKM and he's the MVP of Contenders Season 1, right? He does fucking super amazing play, and my entire business plan was to try and sell him for a lot of money. I'm now limiting the number of teams who can even sign him because I'm now not going to let him go for 20K when no one will pay more than that. You know what I mean? It will actually, in a way,
you have to make a profit from it.
It could shade a few of the really talented players out in a bizarre way because they could kind of be stuck in a weird spot of, I won't because, for example, the point there is, it doesn't really benefit the guy who runs the Contenders team because he can't take his team into Overwatch League. So he loses his best player.
Quite a bit.
Well, the thing is, though, you have to I think you have to trust the market at that point. That the guy, if he's going to naturally find the point at which he can sell like him.
But then can't I just be cynical and say, right, well, this season someone would only offer me 20k. I'll win Contenders again next season. Maybe I get 50k. Sorry, AKM, you got to stay for another season, mate.
Yeah, you could do that.
See, all I'm
risky, but yes,
your problem is you were imagining a world where everyone's kind. I just imagined what if the owner was a cunt. And then I just went from that position. It was weird. I had to put my head into a whole space, really enter a man's mind. But then I imagined what I would do.
Fair enough. That must have been a real experience.
Yeah. So listen, sorry, mate. Tell you what, I'd be licking my fucking chops.
Where were we?
Leave it at that.
Talking about
Cunnilingus.
Cunnilingus. Yes. That was where we were, of course.
Wait, what did you just call it?
Cunnilingus.
Oh no, that's fine.
What did you think?
Bren just said cunning. Bren just said cunnilingus, but I think he was just making a reference
to the rap group.
Yeah,
of course. Yeah,
no, of course.
I have that big fan of intelligence.
Not just another.
Yes, that was what I was going with. No, right. Let's move on to the next point. We've got to wrap up soon because I'm just dying over here. Like I can feel illness slowly taking me over. I'm trapped in the heat of my room. The format of the Overwatch League. We talked about it briefly about how it's split into the Pacific and the Atlantic sort of divisions that apparently don't matter for the first season at least. What's your opinion on these games then? Because like you said, the teams play twice a week. There's 4 days of matches. It's split up into, is it like four
blocks?
4 stages.
Yeah, 4 sections of five week stages. Yeah, and it's different maps for each of the stages, and then at the end of the stage, the Saturday is like a little mini playoff tournament between the top 3 in the division. Okay. I like that facet of it. I think that'll be interesting. But those playoff games, as far as I'm aware, don't have any repercussions on the wider standing, because otherwise you'd be taking the top 3 and making them play extra games and more chance of them fucking around in the top. So I can't see how those top teams would then mini playoff can't go back into the round robin.
Right, explain that again. What playoff?
So the entire 20-week round robin is split up into 4 sections, each with 5 weeks. And to add some kind of flavor to the tournament midway, at the end of each 5-week segment, the Saturday at the end will have a mini tournament, like a playoff bracket between the top 3 teams in the division. Yeah. That's really cool, right? But I have no idea whether the results of that playoff bracket will feed back into the overall standings of this 20-week round robin. I assume not, because then we'd be playing extra games.
You win money, so it's still worth it, obviously.
Yeah, it's the bonuses.
Yeah, right? Does it add to the overall league standings?
Yeah, but you could shit the bed in every playoffs. You could do fantastically in the season, shit the bed in every playoffs, and still, like, that would have an added storyline going into it. Do they just choke when the pressure's on something? I like this system that they've set up.
One of the weird things is that
it makes it interesting.
One of the weird things is that there are 12 teams, but they're 5 weeks, and you're playing 2 games a week, right? So it's 10 games over each stage. So that means you're not playing one team each stage, which seems really arbitrary. But I guess they're just trying to set up a system for later on. But it does seem really, really weird. So I know that there's some teams that are like a.
Wait, doesn't that just mean because you're a team, you're not playing against yourself?
No.
No, there's 11. It would be 11 games, wouldn't that?
So you're not playing.
Yeah. So 12 teams.
So you're not playing one team each stage, meaning you can actually luck out and miss. You can miss like Seoul, you can miss London, Dallas.
Yeah, but that's pretty minor. I think.
Fair, but it's still.
As tournament systems go, when you're averaging it over a 20-week period with 40 games in the whole thing, missing one time of playing Spitfires or something doesn't seem too egregious,
right? But in let's say it's just 10 games for each stage, right? And you're bringing the top 3 into the playoff bracket, so it could influence those little mini playoffs at the end of each stage.
Yeah, I think it's a fairly good compromise actually. If you were going to run, like, if you want to run a full league system so that you have content to give every single time for all of the games, then I think adding in little mini playoffs and then having a big playoff bracket at the end creates a pretty fun system for people to follow. It gives an incentive to follow at the beginning, and it also nicely divides it because map pool is going to be changed. Obviously, it's Blizzard, so you got to assume that they want every map to be played at some point throughout of it and all of the game modes and everything. So this is a nice compromise to make it so it doesn't fuck over the players, I think.
It also means you have less meaningless matches at the end of the season because there's they said they were going to be weighting them in some sort of way, and also each stage operates independently of the one before, right? So that you're just getting points from each stage, presumably. So I mean, it has. Put it this way, you can still get.
What do you mean points?
I mean, I'm just saying like qualifying points for the playoffs at the end of it, or whatever it is, right?
It's just overall standings. It's just overall standards. Yeah. It's just kind of arbitrarily split into 4 pieces, but to give gaps.
I don't think that's the case. From just things
I'm pretty sure the OverwatchLeague.com just says the top standings, the people at the top of the overall standings will go through. Enough. Unless they've worded it terribly.
How are the bonuses going to be worked out? Because I know they said that there's the set 3.5 million as the prize money.
Down
is it not
on the site where they have like it's different amounts of prize money for whatever place you get in the league, and then for all those bonus stages or like the bonus playoffs or whatever it is, you get like 100K for the winner of that, 25K for second place,
okay,
and 0 for third. So.
I think it's actually quite cool that you get money just for placing before you play the playoffs. Because I've always thought every league system should have that, because it's so stupid in games like League of Legends is a great example. In theory, you could be the number 1 placed team in the regular season, but if you just shit the bed in the playoffs, you get
no reward.
Fuck all. You get like top 4 money or something, So I always thought that was kind of stupid that you don't reward the actual format.
Yeah. What I particularly like about this stage system as well is that if there's a massive meta-defining patch in the middle, you have 2 weeks of break where at the end of, say it drops in the middle of stage 3, you have until the end of stage 3 to play on the previous patch. You have a 2-week break with which to scrim or to take a break if you actually want to. You have 2 weeks to scrim on the new patch before it goes live for your first season match for the next stage. So you can have metas that change throughout the tournament while still giving players a couple of weeks to adjust to it, rather than, for example, Apex to APAC, where Runaway and GC Busan had to come in with 3 days practice or something. Or like the fucking first season of Apex, where Envious go from being a team that was probably going to finish in the semi-finals or possibly the quarterfinals to easily being the best team in the tournament. Like that shit will happen. Hashtag Rogue were robbed.
I mean...
Which is also why it's just baffling some of the rosters that have been made here. Like, listen, maybe Seoul Dynasty don't turn out to be as sick as we think. They're at least making the fucking playoffs, aren't they? Come on, let's be reasonable. Like, the more games you have to play in the regular season, the more likely it is the good teams will actually succeed.
Yeah.
And I like the format as well, given that it allows this huge period in the off season. Like the fact that you have 5, possibly 6 months.
No, not
going to
be 6 months. Playoffs are in July.
No, not that long.
Or July, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I believe they last until early August.
Okay, so.
And then obviously we'll have the Overwatch World Cup, so we can all watch the best games ever played again. We've got to do that. So,
absolutely.
Wait for that USA versus South Korea.
But at some point, hopefully, they'll have big tournaments that actually combine the best of like the Apex teams and whoever's wrecking the Pacific Championship that season. With the Owl teams, right. Unless they're scared of showing that the Owl teams are not the best. But those tournaments themselves should be incredible to see actual mashes of talent from Apex as well.
I do worry about that though. Like, listen, from things that Monty said, it sounds as though maybe there's concern, like maybe they understand to have an off-season and let teams play. But I know that so far it's still not known if the Overwatch League teams will be allowed to play in the other tournaments that are in the off-season, And I have to say, if I had to think purely from a developer standpoint, I would expect they'd be super cynical and be like, we're not going to let our teams potentially go and lose to the fucking Apex teams and then come back like, haha, look, the champions of our league who just got shit on 2 months ago are going to retain their title. Like, the story doesn't work as well, does it?
It doesn't work as well. No.
Especially because, even if they lock down everything with all media, it's like, I'll be in there fucking like Charlton Heston and Soylent Green, like, Soylent Green is people, Apex is the best. And then they'll come out with a van and cart me off.
Put you in a straitjacket, take it away.
Yeah.
Just ignore that guy. He's from CS.
That's fine. So, I mean, you talk about the off-season, but you seem to have pretty high expectations of the off-season.
No. I have high hopes for the off-season. That is not the same as high expectations.
I'm going to put words in your mouth like you do for me.
Because also a lot of the large companies that run standalone tournaments have spent a long time either being denied or not thinking it was profitable to run the tournament or whatever the case has been recently. And so...
Which is also a concern, by the way, because that means that Overwatch League probably has to do well for a lot of those to want to engage again. I mean,
exactly,
you know, a lot of them are going balls deep in like PUBG and stuff now. So there's no guarantee that those third-party organizers want to run tournaments, right?
Exactly. So
they might do if it goes really well, though. Sure, it depends if they get the teams, though.
You have an APAC that's run by Blizzard, or like, who's it run by? NetEase, who are the distributors of Blizzard, I think, because it's over in China. And then you essentially have no other tournaments, standalone tournaments that Blizzard have planned. They have the World Cup if they need to fill time, I guess. And then they have, I don't know, they're just kind of hoping that E-League, DreamHack, ESL, who else? Face it. Who are the other players in this? I mean, MLG, yeah.
Well, MLG has to.
Presumably they can just tell MLG
owned by Blizzard. Yeah, it's. Well, they're not owned by Blizzard. It's all under Activision, right?
Yeah. But I think worst case scenario, they would just have APAC and like force MLG to do an event, and then they'd maybe just run their own event as well. So there was some kind of functioning off season. But best case scenario, some of the other big players come in, and we have like another awesome DreamHack, and we have different flavors to each of the events as well that happen in the off season. Because I miss that system, you know. Leagues don't grab me as much.
Well, I mean, Harsha, any thoughts on that, or do you just
I
just
hope that Blizzard does allow for Overwatch League teams to participate in the off season, because I think I agree where I think that tournament formats are far more exciting than a league format because it's not drawn out for so long, and you kind of get to see more high pressure matches, I would say. So hopefully they do allow for that, but I guess we'll see.
All right. Okay. So a good final point then, I guess, to talk about now is, you know, are there any details that have come up that make you more or less more confident with OWL as to it succeeding, or less confident now that we've talked it out, now that we've got a few more facts under our belts? Thorin, I guess we'll start with you.
Well, wait, just to preface this as well, this is not a super hardball question, because what I hate is like when the viewership numbers for Overwatch World Cup came out, and they're like, hey, Richard Lewis, what are you saying now? And stuff like this. It's like, Overwatch League hasn't even started yet. You have no idea what numbers are going to be, you know? It's crazy. Like, the guy is putting up concerns, you know? He doesn't believe in the system, and sometimes he seems like he's slightly overly negative to the way that it's playing out. But certainly, the fact that you had one tournament with 300k views is not enough reason. And the fact that you can claim that you knew it was going to happen all along. No, you just took a position and it happened to be right. It's very possible that there are multiple worlds in which it flopped and Richard's
and it was a LAN
face or whatever.
It was a LAN timed out so that it didn't clash with too many other tournaments. It was the only thing in Overwatch that cleared the whole deck. There's all sorts of factors that, like, if anything, I wouldn't be bragging about that one, because that could be the exception to the rule. You never know.
So this is where when Bren was lining up the question to you, it's not the same thing where it's like, hey, you little Overwatch naysayer, what do you say?
I don't care.
It's like, it's like, no, I'm just setting it up because you were actually one of the people that was treading a weird balance in between, where you clearly saw enough potential in Overwatch to like start your own show and give a shit about it.
Maybe just like
but
Monty.
We're also critical of the
Thank you.
Maybe you just follow Monty everywhere.
No, Monty did Vainglory, mate. I've never even watched that. You know? Just because people do things for money doesn't mean I follow them. No, here's the thing. I personally don't have like high expectations for Overwatch League. Like, I doubt it does hit, you know, like millions of views and instantly make everyone secure that they didn't invest massive amounts of money. I think there'll be a massive amount of risk for at least the first few seasons. But like I said, I'm actually like quietly optimistic that people, like, I actually think one of the big things that harmed the scene was Blizzard essentially shutting down all these third-party tournaments by just like refusing to commit to when Overwatch start, and then what the situation would be, and then teams not knowing if they're in the Overwatch League, so people are just bailing on orgs, etc. I think if you'd have had a full third-party run-up into Overwatch League, you'd have a way better idea of like what a good baseline is, and then what you could add with promotion and these other elements of professionalism. We don't really have that in that sense. We have like a little bit from 2016, and then 2016 was so fragmentary all over the place. It was like a bunch of people who are like holding place, treading water because they know they're going to be involved, or they think their team's going to be in the Overwatch League. There was too many factors that made it so that doesn't seem like it has any bearing on what will happen in the Overwatch League itself. So if I had to guess, I would say the viewing figures will be like 100k, 150k. Maybe if it's like a terrible game where it's the two worst teams, it'll go down to like 50k, you know. I would expect it to start like that. So in that sense, that is actually probably failure. Like, that's probably not a good enough number. But I personally think It's the sort of thing that'll start slow, and it can be like a slow burn and gradually build up over time. And then you hope, as the league gets better, as things get established, as people do create the storylines around the league. And then I actually would personally hope that this is where Blizzard probably doesn't factor it in. But if the off-season is good, like they allow any team that wants to go and play in any tournament and anyone to run a tournament, I could see the off-season being like a perfect counterbalance where it is just tournament, and you choose which ones you play at. You get every teams around the world mixed up in it, and they get to play all these, like, you know, you have the cool one-offs like a DreamHack Winter where it's some good tier 2 teams, but then you have the big high-profile event that's just like a one-weekend top 5 teams all there with some low. If you do this properly, you could essentially like cover the entire gamut. You could have all flavors of Overwatch and competitions. So I feel like I'm not as worried about season 1. I don't think it'll be an abject failure, but it's more like how can it build from season 1?
Something that people say as well quite often is like, do you think it'll fail? And what metric do you even give for a league that's just starting up to the point where you would think it had failed? Because you really have to wait a couple, unless it's just atrocious, you know, like 10K viewers for Overwatch League or something. Okay, the game's dead, wrap it up, send it off.
Plus, like based on what I know about the behind the scenes stuff, like it is true, as I mentioned before, there are certain types of businessmen who, while they like the idea, might invest the 20 million and then the salaries. And then if they're going like, I don't actually see this working out, just pull out instantly and go, well, there's no point me being involved, you know? Okay, first of all, as far as if you look at the fact of certain teams who didn't get in, it almost is implied that you're going to somehow be a long-term partner. You're not in it just buying in now, you know? Because obviously it's a terrible look no matter who it is, even if it's the worst team that pulls out after one season, because it scares other people away. But then also, I think that, to me, a lot of the people buying in, you notice actually it's the same with all big investments of millions in all these different esports games in every game. They don't ever come in and say, I've bought this team because they've got a top LCS team, and I believe that in the future, League of Legends will have massive... They don't ever say that because the owners don't know fuck all about esports. What they say is stuff like, well, you know, traditional sports are sort of dying out, and, you know, like media is very different now, and this is a new sport that could grow one day. So I feel like for a lot of them, if it isn't Overwatch, they'll go into another game. Maybe they'll get an ALCS spot, whatever. And I also feel like a lot of them are actually invested for at least, say, like 3 or 4 years, because their notion is it might take a few years to build it up, you know. Now, whether they might be naive or not, you know, we can't really know all that at the moment. But I don't think many of them will just be like straight out after one. So I don't really see how it really could abjectly fail. Like, to me, the kind of failure that the person who's like a League of Legends fan who hopes dies instantly, it would literally have to have like 1K viewers. And then even then, I don't think people would bail after one season. I think they'd at least say, well, I've spent this much. Let me at least try a couple more seasons, you know, and see how it goes.
I'm not sure whether they would even be able to bail after one season.
Probably not.
The contracts that they've signed, you know, probably lock them into
several years.
A couple of years.
And also remember, there was that element where it was implied that Blizzard's promised a certain level of revenue no matter what. So you're probably at least going to stick around to get that. You know, because remember, once you've bought the team, you're already paying the salary. So you're probably going to stick around to get the rev and then see what you can do elsewhere. And in that sense, it's not as big of a gamble as you think, because it's not like it's just 20 at the beginning. It's not, that's 20 for potentially 5 years, you know?
Yeah. And so if you can't tell whether it's failed for years,
which is a problem in itself in a way,
how the hell do you tell whether it's succeeded as well? Like, people have never defined what would make Overwatch League a success when it kicks off.
I think,
other than they compare it to the tier 1 esports, but that's so ridiculous a bar for success, like that you would think that it would instantly start and be comparable with the LCS in terms of like the viewership that it's raking in, or the fan base, or however much money it's making of revenue or whatever. If it straight up hits that, that's just the most unbelievable success story ever in esports. So I think that in itself is also an unreasonable bar to set as success, but there doesn't seem to be any more reasonable one that anyone's put forward, which just seems to be a lot of viewers, you know, whatever seems to be reason, which I think would be, you know, if people are comfortably getting over 100K views for the first season of Overwatch League in the regular season, that to me will be reasonable success for the league. I'll feel confident about how it's going forwards. And so for me, the fact that Overwatch World Cup got 300K rather than the, you know, 200 or, you know, around that level that I was expecting for it is actually a fairly positive sign. It means that the interest is there, whether or not they can tap into it. So personally, I'm feeling more confident about Overwatch League, whereas I was relatively skeptical about how large it would really be able to get quickly enough.
Yeah, I was super skeptical. I'm not going to get it. I'm just going to skip over it.
You a skeptor?
I was just get to the grime artist, but no. To begin with, and
go on, keep it. You were going so serious there for a second.
Yeah, of course. But the thing that sort of changed my opinion of it was actually not until this is going to sound quite weird now, but I think you've already sat through 3 hours of this, so you can probably just stick through this last bit, right?
Give me a great story.
When I came to America for the Contenders playoffs for the groups and whatnot,
and I heard a young very big immigrant boy chant, USA. I thought anything's possible in this world. You could be president one day, son. Where's this going? Come on.
I took one look. We went to a couple of sports bars, and I took one look, right?
Come on. Yeah.
At the NFL, and I thought, if they're consuming,
this logic doesn't make any sense, does it?
Okay. Keep going.
I thought, if people are watching this, right, this NFL, American football, it's absolutely, in my opinion, it's garbage, right? It's 30 seconds, 30 seconds of gameplay, 30 seconds of adverts. There's high octane. There's graphics moving across the screen, and they're pulling in so many viewers and so many people watching this. If people are watching this, there's no reason why anything can't succeed on this level if you market it correctly, right? That's my appropriate thought process for this. Now, this is coming from someone who is, quite accurately an idiot. That's what I'd label myself as. I've got no knowledge of business.
The audience, the layman.
The layman. This is me. I'm speaking for all of the Reddit plebeians that you guys insult on a regular basis. I'm their spokesperson at this moment of time. Yeah, that's what really honestly quite really told me that this was actually feasible. And also the fact that there were all these businessmen investing in it, and also the fact that the Overwatch World Cup viewership didn't shit the bed in the second year that it was done. I thought maybe if it reaches the levels of the first year, okay. But the fact that it actually, did it exceed the viewership? Because I believe it did in terms of, significantly.
Is 300 larger than 200? Yes, it did.
Basic maths escapes me, on a regular basis, but I believe I can figure that one out.
Quick maths.
2 + 2 is 4, right? We're making references to that now. We're really appealing to that sort of lowest common denominator. Okay, but that's what sold me on it. So I'm curious now. Harsha, the last man to speak. What,
for the love of God, don't tell a story like that.
I like the NFL. I don't know what the fuck he's on about, but
that is your problem.
No, for us, when we sat down, we watched the game at the first point. We came into a sports bar. We didn't have a clue what was going on, and it literally felt like there was more adverts than playtime because they were like sending it back to, and it was when the first time you watch an NFL broadcast as well. They throw things at you. The actual scene that you're on changes so quickly that it feels like kind of an overload of information, but you're still watching it because you're trying to make sense of what everything's happening. So I think to kind of decipher and pick together what Bren was trying to say is that Overwatch is just kind of fast-paced action, and if you present it in a way that's appealing and throw graphical stats over it and make sure that the game feels like it's flowing all the time, then it's still appealing from a spectator point of view like that as well.
Well, I actually have, along those lines, he was making me think there, a very, very cynical reason as to how it could in the short term succeed, which is okay. Already I don't know how many esports viewers it can get. Therefore, I have no clue if it could ever get televised viewers or something like that, because actually no one knows for any esport. Like, for example, when they try Counter-Strike on television, it doesn't actually do much better than a random fighting game, which probably doesn't have that many players. It seems very hit and miss as to whether there's any translation, because obviously the people who watch on PCs don't go to a TV to watch the game, So even with that said, so even though in a way I'm setting up for even bigger failure for the Overwatch League, in a world where people who are NFL owners and massive business owners want to own a team because they think it's the next big thing, and then all their friends say it's the next big thing to buy a team, I could see that carrying up the chain enough, whether there's the numbers yet or not, to where someone manages to sell a TV channel or a big broadcaster on, you've got to have the exclusive broadcast rights for this for 100 million, But the reason you're going to do it now is, we don't have the viewers now. But again, it's the same line they're probably using in every one of these pitches. This is the new NFL. This is the new UFC. And there'll be someone eventually, if it can survive, that probably will buy that. So now listen, that will probably be rolling it all up into the ultimate failure, because I don't know that it'll get the millions on TV to make that worthwhile. But that would definitely be success for the teams, because they'd all get their cut of that rev, and they'd all, it'd fuel it, it'd keep it going a bit longer, before the big crash.
Right.
Before it all comes
great crash.
I'm quietly optimistic, I would say, because I think that there is still a part of the casual audience that Blizzard hasn't reached out to yet. They still have so many options that they can use to get to them. And if you keep a fraction of the, like, let's say 1/3 of that 300,000, that's already I would say that's a solid amount to build off of. And if you're bringing in more and more people that like Overwatch eSports, you can just build off the 100K. That doesn't seem like an unreasonable number, I would say. So
if they could just tap into the main subreddit, wouldn't they get so many more viewers?
Yeah.
That's quite interesting, actually.
So while I realise it's actually illegal for companies to own a subreddit, gosh, imagine if there was some sort of abstract way you could get to these people and make them want to do what you wanted to do.
Lol.
Can't imagine.
Lol.
For you know who was at BlizzCon reportedly with a media pass? Members of the subreddits. Yeah.
Wow, so that's brilliant. So people who create more valuable content. People who are literally the opposite of a media content creator. Someone who just takes someone else's media, benefits from it, and then just chooses which not to allow to succeed. Fucking hell. Well, I think we've solved it. Blizzard has their finger right on the pulse of esports.
Like you said, it's just appealing to the Reddits, you know? Just appealing to the Reddits.
Isn't it?
I mean, anything else to add on to that little section there, or you finished up, Harsha? You're finished. All right. I think that pretty much means we can call it quits. Thank goodness. Thanks for watching episode 7. Harsha's probably already pressed, stop recording at this point, like he does so often. I do these little trail off into little tangents and stories towards the end. He's like, "Yeah, I stopped recording like 5 minutes ago, mate. Sorry."
Actually, while we've got Thorin on the podcast, I want to ask you a question that was it was actually a couple of months ago. It seemed to be a distinct change in policy for your content. Was that at the end, it would always be, really interesting point, and it would just be a straight cut off. And now you seem to always ask if they want to shout something out or if they've got something to say to their fans that one episode. Like that. It seems a very direct 180 in terms of policy that came around a few months ago. What's the thought process?
No, actually, sadly, there's no great story to that. Like, it's true, I always end my shows just on a hard cut because mainly I think it's just boring to hear the outro. And if someone makes a great point at the end of the show, it's better just end it, Like, it's not a movie. You don't sit through the fucking credits in the movie anyway, do you? Unless it's some dogshit Marvel movie where you might see some crap spoiler. But aside from those plebs, no, the part of the problem was, in the past, I controlled the whole show, right? But I noticed in these last few episodes, I'll keep thinking, like, got to go in 15 minutes. I'll be trying to, like, end the episode, and Monty will be going, "But Thorin, aren't we going to talk about the Contenders 0 preseason?" I'm like, yes, Monty. All right. Well, what do you think, player who I vaguely know, but who is a friend of Monty? I think we've let you too much behind the curtain there. Put it back up. Ignore the man behind the curtain.
See, I was only talking about your reflections videos as well, but you just gave us a great insight into OverSight. There you go. That was my little ending.